The rain at Glendale Key doesn't just fall, it attacks. It hammered the windows of the Vesper Diner like it was trying to get in, turning the pink neon sign into a blurry, bleeding watercolor. It was 10 at night, the air thick with the smell of wet wool and old coffee, and my shift was finally, mercifully, over. My feet weren't just aching, they were screaming, a dull throb that had worked its way up my calves from standing for a double. My apron was damp, my ponytail stuck to the back of my neck, and my hands were shaking. It wasn't just the caffeine crash, I was vibrating with a low, sick panic. My phone buzzed in my apron pocket. I didn't need to look. It was my landlord, Mr. Henderson, for the third time this week. His text from an hour ago was burned into my brain. Rent increase effective the 1st, 30%. 30%. He might as well have asked for my blood. Lena Table 4 needs their check, and 7 wants another round. Greg, the night manager, barked from behind the counter, his face shiny with sweat and grease. On it, Greg, I called back, forcing a cheerfulness I didn't feel. The diner was packed. It was always like this when the weather turned, everyone seeking shelter and hot coffee. I ducked past Sal at the grill, the heat of the flat top warming my face for a second. My left shoelace, the one that had lost its plastic tip weeks ago, flopped loose again. If I tripped holding a full tray, Greg would have my hide. I scanned the floor. Every booth was full, except one. Table 12. It was in the back corner, slightly raised, offering a view of the whole diner but shielded by a frosted glass partition. It was always kept reserved. I never knew for who. But Greg treated that empty booth with more respect than he treated any of his staff. I just needed a second. I glanced over my shoulder. Greg was yelling into the phone. I darted into the alcove of table 12, dropped onto the cool vinyl seat, and bent down, fumbling with the wet, fraying lace. I shouldn't be here. Get up, Lena. Before I could even make a loop, my phone didn't just buzz, it screamed, vibrating against the tabletop with an emergency alarm I didn't recognize. I fumbled it out of my apron. CHCC, the Community Health Coordination Center. My blood didn't just run cold, it froze solid. They only call when it's Mom. My thumb, still slick with coffee grounds, fumbled to answer. Hello? My voice was a squeak. I was still hunched over, hiding. Is this Miss Lena Ortega? The voice on the other end was sterile, bureaucratic, and loud enough that I had to jam the phone against my ear. Yes, this is Lena. Is it about my mother, Isabella? Your mother was transferred from the county clinic approximately 30 minutes ago. She presented with acute respiratory distress. Acute distress, oh God, her asthma. The linoleum floor swam before my eyes. She is being stabilized at St. Lucent Hospital. However, intake requires a deposit guarantee for the specialized wing. I suddenly realized I wasn't alone. The booth hadn't been empty. They had just been so quiet. They seemed carved from the shadow. 3 of them. 2 men in coats so black and perfectly tailored they seemed to drink the light. A woman with hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. A leather briefcase resting on her lap. And the man in the middle? I hadn't even seen him breathe, and he was just watching me, his hands resting lightly on the table. He looked to be in his mid-30s, his face a study in sharp angles and stillness. His eyes, though his eyes were not calm. They were heavy, gray and analytic, like he was weighing every piece of me. As I stared, frozen, he slowly, almost lazily, raised one hand. It wasn't a wave, it was a command. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at his companions, who had perhaps begun to shift. The gesture was absolute. Silence. He then turned that heavy gaze back to me and gave a short, sharp nod, as if granting me permission to continue having my world crumble in his private booth. Lena? Greg's voice was a roar. He was storming toward me, his face a blotchy, furious red. What in the hell do you think you're doing? I told you that is a private table. Get up now. I scrambled, phone still pressed to my ear. Greg, please, I'm sorry, it's my mom. I don't care if it's the Pope, he spat. Hey, boss man, leave the pretty thing alone. a drunk from table 10, a beefy guy in a construction vest, staggered to his feet and lurched toward me. He was trying to be a hero, but his eyes were blurry and mean. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my bicep. "Come sit with us, honey. We'll treat you right. Take your hand off her." The voice was so quiet it was almost a whisper. It cut through Greg's yelling, the drunk slurring, and the hiss of the rain outside like a razor. It came from the man in the middle of table 12. He hadn't moved. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't even looked at the drunk. He was still looking right at me. The drunk's hand didn't just let go. It recoiled, like he'd touched a hot stove. He stumbled back, sudden sobriety washing over his face. Greg's mouth snapped shut, the tirade dying in his throat, the entire diner, the clatter of forks, the hum of conversation. All of it seemed to dip in volume, caught in the gravity of that one soft-spoken command. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, I stammered, pushing myself backward, desperate to escape. My hips slammed into the edge of the table. The full, heavy pot of coffee I'd been holding, the one I'd forgotten about when airborne. Time slowed to a thick syrup. I saw the black liquid arcing through the air, right toward the man in the perfect $1,000 coat. I braced for the shout, the explosion. It never came. In a move so fast it defied physics. He didn't lean away. He leaned in. He threw his arm across the table, not to save himself, but to block me. The scalding coffee splashed over the dark wool of his sleeve, over the back of his hand, onto the floor. Not a single drop touched my apron. He straightened slowly, ignoring the steam rising from his arm. The two people with him, the bodyguard, Elias Trammell, built like a vending machine, and the lawyer, Moira Dace, sharp as a needle, exchanged a look I couldn't decipher. It wasn't just surprise, it was recalculation, as if their boss shielding a clumsy waitress from hot coffee was an anomaly, a variable they hadn't accounted for. And then I saw it. The barest, faintest trace of a smile. It wasn't a real smile. It was the ghost of one, just touching the corner of his mouth as he looked at the mess on the floor. The sterile voice on the phone was still talking, oblivious, and the hospital's policy requires the deposit before we can admit her to the critical care wing. "How much?" I broke in, my voice shaking so hard I could barely form the words. There was a pause. "The initial hold is $10,000, ma'am." 10,000. I almost laughed, a hysterical sound bubbling in my chest. $10,000. He might as well have asked for the moon. I had maybe 200 in my checking account, and that was for Henderson's rent. My vision blurred. The tears were hot, instant, and humiliating. She was going to die. My mom was going to die in a hallway because I couldn't cover a deposit. I hung up the phone. "Sit down." It was him again, the man with the stone-gray eyes, Enzo Bellarosa. "Greg," he said, and Greg flinched, startled that this man knew his name. "Bring a clean, damp towel and a fresh pot of coffee, and bring Miss Ortega a glass of water." He gestured, not with impatience, but with a quiet, undeniable finality, toward the seat I had just fled, the seat I had defiled. "Sir, I can't," I whispered, wiping my face with the back of my hand. "You will not be reprimanded at my table." It wasn't a suggestion. I sank back into the booth, opposite him, feeling like a stray dog being offered a steak. Greg, pale and sweating, practically ran to do his bidding. The noisy tables around us had gone conspicuously silent. People were pretending very hard not to be watching us, which meant every eye in the place was on our table. Enzo Bellarosa turned his attention to the woman, Moira. He didn't say a word. He just tapped the polished surface of the table. Twice. She nodded, understanding a silent command, and immediately began typing on her own phone, her expression grim and efficient. He looked back at me. His gaze was intense, analytical. He wasn't pitying me. He was reading me. "St. Lucen," he stated. It wasn't a question. "Acute asthma." I just nodded, dumbstruck. "How did you—" "You talk clearly when you're scared," he said simply. He slid his own clean linen napkin across the table. "You have a coffee ground on your cheek." I scrubbed at my face, mortified. He discreetly slipped something from his wallet. It wasn't a credit card. It was a piece of black, heavy metal, seamless and bearing only a single engraved crest. He placed it under his saucer just as Greg returned, trembling with the water. "Put my tab on this," Enzo said, his voice low, "and you will call St. Lucent Hospital. Tell them the Bella Rosa logistics account is handling the intake and all charges for Isabella Ortega. All of them. Any medical invoices for her tonight. Any follow-up. You send them directly to my office. Is that understood?" Greg's eyes were wide as dinner plates. He just nodded, scooped up the card like it was a holy relic, and disappeared toward the register. I stared at him, the water glass cold in my hand. "Why?" My voice was barely a whisper. "You don't know me. I spilled coffee all over you." His expression didn't change, but his eyes seemed to soften. Just a fraction. "My coat will survive," he said, dabbing at his sleeve with the towel Greg had brought. "You're in trouble, and you were polite while your world was ending. Besides," he added, a strange note entering his voice, "you answered the call when you needed to. Some people don't." I didn't know what that meant. I just looked at this man, this stranger who spoke in riddles and paid $10,000 hospital bills like he was ordering dessert. Outside, the storm broke, the rain intensified, hammering the plate glass, and the wind howled. The pink neon Vesper sign flickered, died for a second, then buzzed back to life, casting his face in shades of shadow and garish red. That's when I saw them. Through the deluge, sliding up to the curb like sharks in the dark, 2 black SUVs, then a third. They killed their headlights, but their engines were running. Low thrums I could feel in my teeth. The rain slicked off their tinted, impenetrable windows. They weren't here for coffee. They were an omen. Elias, the mountain-sized bodyguard, went utterly still. He leaned toward Enzo, his voice a low rumble. "Boss, we have company. Looks like Cade's crew." Enzo didn't even look out the window. He was still watching me. "Did you bring the checks for table 4, Lena?" he asked, his voice perfectly level. It took my brain a full second to reboot, to switch tracks from hospital and SUVs to Waitress. "What? Oh, yes, right here." I fumbled in my apron, my shaking hands pulling out the small black leather folder. "Good," he said. "Go deliver them." It was a dismissal. But it felt different. It felt like an order meant to move me out of a target zone. I stood up, moving on pure autopilot. My legs felt like jelly. I took 2 steps toward table 4, away from table 12, away from him. A sound like a champagne cork, no, like a hammer hitting concrete exploded right by my ear. The entire front window of the Vesper diner, the one facing the street, didn't just shatter, it disintegrated. I screamed. A million diamonds of glass rained down like ice. Before the first shard hit the checkered floor, Enzo Bellarosa was out of the booth. He crossed the 10 feet between us in a single bound. He didn't just push me, he tackled me, his arms wrapping around my head like a steel cage, his entire body that expensive coat, the smell of rain and clean starch crashing over me, shielding me. We hit the ground hard, skidding on tile and broken glass. Another shot. Pop. And another. Pop, pop. I was buried beneath him. My breath knocked out, my cheek pressed hard against the cold floor. I was clutching my head, screaming. The only things I could hear were the ringing in my ears, the screams of the other diners, and the steady, impossibly calm beat of his heart against my cheek. The smell of sulfur and shattered glass filled my lungs. For a second, maybe 3. The world was just the muffled, steady thump, thump, thump of Enzo Bellarosa's heart against my ear, and the solid, immovable weight of his body shielding mine. He'd pressed me into the gritty floor, his arm hooked around the back of my head like a steel clamp, absorbing the spray of glass shrapnel with his own back. "Elias!" His voice wasn't a shout, it was a low growl, a vibration against my cheek. The big man, Elias Trammell, was already in motion. He moved with a speed that defied his size, vaulting the service counter. I heard a loud, metallic rattling, a mechanical scream, followed by a heavy, final clang. The red and blue chaos of the streetlights vanished, plunging the diner into near total darkness. The only light came from the flickering grill in the back and the surviving half of the Vesper's interior neon sign, which cast a sick pink glow. He dropped the rolling steel security gate, locking us in with the carnage. Only then did Enzo move. He didn't just stand up, he coiled, rolling off me in a single fluid motion and coming to a crouch, one hand already pulling me up by the elbow. He didn't lift me to my feet, just hauled me into a sitting position, my back against the vinyl-covered base of the booth. "Are you hit?" he demanded. His gray eyes weren't calm now, they were electric, scanning my face, my neck, my arms, looking for blood. "I don't think so," I stammered, my teeth chattering so hard I could barely speak. My palms were stinging. I looked down and saw tiny, glittering slivers of glass embedded in my skin. "Stay down, don't move." Outside, beyond the steel wall, I heard an engine roar as tires screamed on the wet pavement. They were leaving. Then the alarms started. First, the diner's pathetic, bleeding burglar alarm, and then, immediately after, the sirens. They weren't distant, they were close, incredibly close. Moira Dace, the lawyer, was already at the gate, peering through one of the slats. "UFI," she said, her voice tight. "They were at the corner. That's a response time of under a minute." "It's a setup," Elias rumbled, standing by the gate, his hand resting on something inside his coat. "Coincidence," Enzo countered, his voice flat. He was brushing large shards of glass from the shoulder of his ruined coat, his expression one of pure, cold annoyance. He didn't look like a victim. He looked like a man who'd just had a very expensive meeting interrupted. Heavy pounding vibrated through the steel gate. "UFI, open this gate. We have a report of shots fired. Open up now." Elias looked at Enzo. Enzo gave a short, sharp nod. The bodyguard hit the up switch. The gate screeched open, rising 3 feet, revealing a half-dozen pairs of black combat boots and the dark blue tactical vests of the Urban Financial Investigations Unit. "Nobody move hands where I can see them." 2 agents ducked under the gate, their weapons held low, sweeping the room. The diner was a disaster zone. Customers were weeping in booths. Greg, the manager, was curled in a ball behind the soda fountain, whimpering. The lead agent, a man with a face like worn leather and a badge that read Scanlon, pointed at Enzo. You look calm. You know what this was about?" Enzo didn't flinch. He slowly reached inside his coat, a move that made both agents tense, and pulled out a simple, impossibly elegant card case. He extracted one card. It was heavy, cream-colored stock, bearing only an embossed crest and 2 words, Bella Rosa Logistics. "I was having a coffee," Enzo said, his voice as smooth as polished marble. "My lawyer," he gestured to Moira, "will be happy to provide a statement." Agent Scanlon stared at the card, then at Enzo's face. There was a flicker of recognition, and something else, frustration. "Bella Rosa. Of course. You bring your port business to the key, and now we've got bullets flying." He jerked his chin at me. I was still on the floor, shaking. "And who's she?" "She's the waitress," Enzo said, his voice flat and cold. "She spilled hot coffee on me seconds before your department allowed my dinner to be interrupted by gunfire." Another agent, younger, with holder on his vest, knelt beside me, his expression more concerned. "Ma'am, did you see the vehicle? The shooters?" "Black," I whispered, the words sticking to my throat. "It was just black SUVs. It's raining so hard, I have to go." The adrenaline was fading, and the panic about my mother came rushing back in, 10 times stronger. "Please, my mom, she's at St. Lucie, she's sick. I have to go now." Enzo looked down and tapped the face of his watch. The crystal was a spiderweb of cracks. He frowned, ignoring Agent Scanlon completely. "She's right," Enzo said. "She needs to be at the hospital." He turned and simply started walking toward the half-open gate. "Hey!" Scanlon shouted, stepping to block him. "I said nobody leaves. This is a crime scene, Mr. Logistics." Enzo stopped. He didn't turn around fully, just looked back over his shoulder. The pink neon light caught the sharp angle of his jaw. "Agent Scanlon," he said, his voice dropping to that same quiet, deadly register he'd used on the drunk. "You are currently detaining a civilian witness whose mother is in critical respiratory distress. My lawyer will remain here to answer your questions. I will not." He ducked under the gate and was gone. Scanlon lunged, but Moira Dace stepped directly in his path. "Agent," she said, offering a tight, reptilian smile, "I believe you were asking for my statement." The agent cursed, but he knew he'd been outmaneuvered. I scrambled to my feet, glass tinkling to the floor. "Please," I begged Agent Holder. "I have to—" "Go," Holder said, his eyes hard. "Go. Get out of here. We know where to find you." I ran. I burst through the gate into the cold, shocking rain. The air was electric, smelling of wet pavement and ozone. And then the lights hit me. Flashes. Not from police cameras. They were brighter, more chaotic. Popping from behind a closed newsstand, from across the street, paparazzi. 2, maybe 3 of them, their long lenses looking like cannons. Enzo, was that Cade sending a message? Bella Rosa, who was the target. "Hey, Enzo, who's the girl?" They weren't here for a diner shooting. They were here for him. One of the black SUVs, not one of the shooters, but one of his, which had been parked down the block, was now idling at the curb, silent and menacing. Elias was already in the driver's seat. Enzo was holding the back door open, the rain sluicing off his ruined coat. "Lena, get in." I froze on the sidewalk. This was the moment, the line. On one side was my life, miserable, broke, but mine. On the other side was this world of quiet commands, gunfire, and men who paid hospital bills. "I can't," I stammered, hugging my arms. "I'll take the bus. St. Lucent isn't far." "The bus won't come for 30 minutes, Enzo said, his voice impatient, cutting through the rain. "The UFI will hold you for questioning for 3 hours. Your mother doesn't have that long. Get in the car." "I can't just—" "Buzz? My phone vibrated violently in my apron pocket. I fumbled for it, my hands slick with rain. It wasn't my landlord. It was a notification from my banking app. My zero balance overdrawn by $50 banking app. "Pending deposit $10,000.00 from STT Lucent Med Payment Trust Memo. Ortega admittance hold cleared." $10,000. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't a check. It was done. In the 10 minutes since he'd given Greg that black card, the money had been transferred. My mother was being admitted. I looked up at him, stunned. "The hospital is waiting for you, Lena," he said, his voice softer now, as if he knew exactly what I was seeing on my screen. "She's being moved to the respiratory wing right now." I looked at the diner, now cordoned off with yellow tape. I looked at the UFI agents. I looked at the $10,000 on my phone. I got in the car. The door shut with a heavy, satisfying thunk. The sound of the world, the rain, the sirens, the shouting paparazzi was instantly cut off, replaced by an insulated, tomb-like silence. The air inside smelled faintly of rich, dark leather and the damp wool of his coat. The SUV didn't just pull away. It flowed into traffic, a predator separating from the herd. We sat in silence for several blocks, the glow of the dashboard the only light. The city lights were just blurs of color through the tinted, rain-streaked windows. "Who are you?" I finally whispered, the words feeling small and stupid in the opulent quiet. He was staring out his window at the dark, churning water of the quay as we sped past. "I'm the port transport boss, as those photographers call me." He turned his head, and his eyes found mine in the dark. They were like polished stones. "But for you, I am a man who owes a thank you to your future." "My future? That doesn't make any sense." "It doesn't have to," he said. The SUV surged onto the highway, accelerating with a power I could feel in my chest. Elias, at the wheel, spoke, his voice a low rumble. Boss, that was Cade's signature. Sloppy. The UFI patrol was too convenient. He must have tipped them. He was hoping to catch you armed after the hit, or pin the whole thing on you. Enzo nodded slowly, his face a mask of stone. Ronan Cade is desperate. He wants pure Aurora, and he thinks this performance will scare me off. Do we send a reply? Elias asked. The depot on 7th is vulnerable tonight. I flinched. Send a reply. I knew exactly what that meant. No, Enzo said, and his voice was sharp. Absolute. No escalation, not tonight. Tonight, our only priority is Miss Ortega. He looked at me, his gaze heavy. She is the only priority. Elias just inclined his head, his eyes on the road. Understood, boss. We pulled up to the St. Lucent Hospital emergency bay in less than 15 minutes. It was a different world, all white light, gleaming steel, and a quiet, terrifying efficiency. Moira Des was standing by the automatic doors, as if she'd been waiting for us. She must have taken a different car. She held a blue visitor's pass. She's on the 4th floor, respiratory wing, room 412 inches, Moira said to me, her voice crisp and professional. Your mother's file was processed, and the hold was cleared exactly 11 minutes ago. Everything is covered. 11 minutes. It took me 2 hours to fight with intake on a good day. Moira put a cool hand on my arm, stopping me. Lena, she said, looking me dead in the eye, I want to be very clear. Mister, Bella Rosa does things because he chooses to do them. There are no strings attached to this. You understand me. This is a gift. Go. Be with your mother. I just nodded, speechless, and ran inside. The 4th floor was hushed, the air smelling of antiseptic and floor wax. I found 412 and pushed the door open. She looked so small. My mom, Isabella, was tiny in the massive, high-tech bed, a clear oxygen mask over her face, but her eyes were open, the sheer animal panic gone, replaced by a hazy, medicated calm. Lena, she whispered, her voice papery and weak, her hand, thin and worn, fumbled for mine on the railing. I'm here, Mama. I gripped her hand, the relief so powerful it made my knees buckle. I sank onto the stool beside the bed, pressing my forehead to her knuckles. I'm right here. You're okay. Her eyes fluttered, then drifted past me, toward the doorway. Such a handsome boy. I turned. Enzo Bellarosa was standing in the hall, just outside the threshold. He hadn't entered the room. His hands were pushed deep into the pockets of his damp trousers, his ruined coat hanging open. He wasn't looking at me, or at my mother. He was looking at the equipment, the heart monitor, the IV drip, the oxygen reader. He was assessing the situation, the angles, the cost. His expression wasn't sad or empathetic. It was one of profound, heavy duty. Mama, I whispered, my face burning. He's just someone's boss. Mama, he helped with the ride. So handsome, as she murmured again, and her eyes drifted shut, the medicine pulling her under. I stayed there for a minute, just listening to the steady, rhythmic puff of the oxygen machine. When I looked back up, he was gone. I quietly slipped out into the hall, and he was down by the elevators, talking in low tones with Elias. He saw me approaching and motioned for his men to wait. He walked to meet me halfway. He stopped a very deliberate, respectful 5 feet away. She is stable. Yes, they said the new medication is working. Thank you. The words felt pathetic. I don't know what to say. I can't ever repay this. It's paid, he said simply, for tonight. He held out something small, black and heavy. It wasn't a normal smartphone. It was thick, utilitarian, with no logo. Take this. I stared at it. What is it? It's secure. There is only one number in it, mine. You're in my world now. Lena, whether you intended to be or not, Cade's crew saw you with me. They saw me protect you. The sterile hallway suddenly felt ice cold. What does that mean? It means that until I handle Ronan Cade, you are a target, Wagitio, he said, his voice devoid of emotion. They see you as leverage. He pushed the phone into my trembling hand. His fingers were warm. I will deal with Cade, he stated. But if anyone else pressures you, your landlord, the police, anyone at all, you use that phone. You call me when you feel you are being forced. Do you understand?" I just nodded, my throat too tight to speak. He looked at me for one more long second, then turned without another word. Elias and Moira stepped into the waiting elevator. The door slid shut, leaving me alone in the hallway, holding a mystery phone and the weight of a $10,000 debt. I was too wired to sit. I needed air. I needed something that wasn't this. I took the elevator down to the main lobby, a vast, empty atrium of white marble, smelling of disinfectant. The gift shop was closed. "Miss Ortega." I jumped. A man in a rumpled trench coat was standing near the automatic doors. He looked exhausted, mid-40s with tired, intelligent eyes. He held up a cheap leather wallet, flashing a badge. "Agent Kane Holder, UFI. I was at the diner. I split off when I heard Bella Rosa was heading for this hospital." "I already spoke to an agent," I said, my hand instinctively tightening around the phone in my pocket. "I know. I'm not here about the shooting. Not officially." He stepped closer, his voice low and urgent. "I saw him put you in that SUV. I saw you accept the ride." "He saved my mom's life," I said, the words coming out stronger than I felt. "Today, he did," Holder agreed grimly. "Listen to me, kid. I've been working the Glendale Key for 5 years. I'm trying to build a case against Bella Rosa and Ronan Cade. They're two sides of the same dirty coin. One shoots up diners. The other, he just buys them." "He paid the hospital bill," I argued, feeling weak. "And you have to ask yourself why." Holder shot back. He looked around the empty, bright lobby. "Be careful. Miss Ortega. Really careful. Enzo Bellarosa doesn't give gifts. He makes investments. And I'm telling you, anyone he pulls into his circle, they have a habit of disappearing, one way or another." He pressed his official, flimsy business card into my other hand. "When you're ready to talk to the right side, you call me." He turned and walked out the automatic doors, disappearing into the night, leaving me standing alone in the sterile white light. I was caught between a man who paid my debts with a whisper and a man who warned me that payment would cost me my soul. I looked down. In my left hand was the agent's card. In my right, the cold, heavy, anonymous phone. It already felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I spent the night in that molded plastic chair next to my mother's bed. I held her hand. My world shrunk to the rhythmic puff hiss of the oxygen machine and the steady, reassuring beep of the heart monitor. Agent Holder's card felt like a piece of cardboard in my right pocket. Enzo Bellarosa's heavy, silent phone felt like a river stone in my left. Every time the elevator chimed down the hall, I flinched, expecting I didn't know what, a UFI agent, a man in a tailored suit, or one of the shadows from the black SUV. The morning sun, gray and weak through the sanitized glass, brought no relief. It only illuminated the trap I was in. My own phone, the one with the cracked screen and the dying battery, started buzzing just after 7. The first text was from Sal, the fry cook at the Vesper. "Place is shut down. Lena, cops have it taped off. News vans on the curb. Greg's talking about filing for bankruptcy. We're all on temporary leave." Temporary leave in Glendale Key, temporary meant start looking. I was officially out of a job. The next buzz came a minute later. "Mr. Henderson, my landlord. Just a reminder, rent is due on the 1st. The increase is firm. 30%, no exceptions." 30%. I couldn't even pay the original amount. Then came the final blow, an email from the St. Lucent billing department. I stared at the screen, my blood turning to slush. The $10,000 from Bella Rosa Logistics hadn't been a gift. It had been an admittance hold, a deposit. Now came the itemized list, the specialized wing, the respiratory specialists, the new medications, the overnight monitoring. It was already another $5,400. And at the bottom, the sterile, brutal sentence, balance due upon patient discharge. I was drowning. I couldn't ask the hospital for a payment plan. Enzo's corporate account had flagged me as someone with resources. I couldn't go to Agent Holder. What was he going to do? Arrest my landlord for being greedy, I was trapped by the very generosity that had saved my mother's life. I was back in my tiny, peeling apartment, staring at the brick wall that served as my only view, when the black phone on my counter pulsed. It didn't ring. It never rang. It just vibrated, a low, insistent thrum that felt alive. It was the only thing in the room that seemed to have any power. I picked it up. There was only one contact. I pressed call. He answered on the first beat, Lena. No hello, no how are you, just my name, spoken in that same impossibly quiet, controlled voice. He sounded like he'd been waiting for my call. Mr. Bellarosa, my voice was a dry croak. Your mother is stable, he said. It wasn't a question. The doctors are pleased with her response to the new treatment. How did you... I am informed? A slight pause. I'm not calling about the 10,000, Lena. That is settled. I will find a way to pay you back, I whispered, the words tasting like ash, all of it. I require a stenographer, he said, ignoring my promise. Someone fast, someone who is not on my current payroll and who is not known. 2 nights of work, starting tonight. My heart hammered. A stenographer like for a legal deposition? For a meeting, he clarified. You will sit. You will type every word that is spoken. You will not remember it afterward. The remuneration for these 2 nights will be the complete and total erasure of your mother's hospital debt. All of it, the $10,000 hold, and every charge that has come since. He knew. Of course he knew. He'd seen the trap from the beginning. He hadn't just paid the deposit. He had been monitoring the new charges. He had waited for the squeeze. Agent Holder's voice echoed in my ear. He doesn't give gifts. He makes investments. No, I said. The word was small but sharp. No, thank you. I appreciate what you did for my mom, but I don't want to be involved in whatever Bellarosa logistics really is. I understand, he said. The line went silent. I thought he had hung up. I stared at the dead phone, my hand shaking. A second later, it vibrated again. A text message. It was a photograph. My stomach hollowed out. The photo was grainy, taken from a distance, looking down on the street in front of my own building, leaning against the alley wall. Half hidden in the morning shadows was a man, and he was smoking, looking right at my apartment door. I recognized the coat. It was one of the men who had been in the SUV, the men who had shot up the diner, Cade's crew. My legs gave out, and I sat hard on the kitchen floor. Another text came through from Enzo. He's not my man. He's Cade's. They know where you live. Lena, they know who you are. They are watching you because I protected you. You are safest where they cannot reach you, which is beside me. This was the trap. Polished and sprung. Cade had made me a target, and Enzo was offering the only sanctuary, a shadowy, gilded cage. My fingers, numb and clumsy, pressed the call button again. What are your terms? I whispered. My driver will be at your corner at 8 o'clock. No, I said, a desperate, brittle anger rising in me. My terms? I'll type for you. I'll be your stenographer. But that's it. You keep your distance. I'm just an employee. And it has to be legal. What I'm doing, it has to be legal. There was a long pause on the other end. This time, I could almost hear the ghost of that smile, the one I'd seen in the diner. It will be as legal, he replied, as necessity allows. The line clicked dead. At exactly 8 p.m., the black SUV slid to the curb. It was the same one. Elias was at the wheel. He didn't get out, just unlocked the back door remotely. He nodded once in the rearview mirror as I climbed in. We didn't go to the port. We didn't go to a warehouse. We drove downtown, to a gleaming glass spire that disappeared into the low-hanging clouds. A private elevator took us to the penthouse. The doors opened onto the Club Halcyon. It wasn't a smoky, windowless back room. It was a sprawling, opulent lounge, all dark mahogany, soft leather, and a 3-walled, floor-to-ceiling view of the city lights glittering on the bay. A jazz trio played softly in the corner. Men and women in expensive clothes sipped cocktails. It was clean. It was beautiful. And it was a complete lie. The air was so thick with tension it was hard to breathe. The smiles didn't reach anyone's eyes. The whispers in the corners stopped as we walked through. This was a clean place, a casino for men who didn't want to get their hands dirty, all hidden behind the mask of a respectable club. Moira Dace, the lawyer, met me by a pillar. She looked even sharper here, in a severe black dress. She handed me a slim, silver laptop. "You will sit here," she murmured, gesturing to a small, raised desk in the shadows, just behind the main conference table. "You have a perfect view of everyone, but you are not part of the conversation. You type every word. You offer no opinions. You do not make eye contact. Are we clear?" "Yes, ma'am," I said, my voice tight. "I type 120 words per minute, with accuracy." Moira's eyebrow twitched, a flicker of surprised approval. "Good." Enzo was already at the head of the long table, staring out at the rain-swept city. He wasn't the man from the diner or the man from the hospital. He was in his element. He wore a dark, perfectly cut suit, no tie, and he radiated an authority that was as silent and absolute as the deep water of the bay below. The meeting began. 3 men representing some kind of shipping consortium sat opposite him, and they did talk about logistics, but the words were all wrong, slippery and coded. The green lane slots are compromised. Enzo, one man, older, with a pinky ring, said, "It's chaos." "Cade is flooding the channel," Enzo replied, his voice a low, bored monotone. He didn't look up from a file in front of him. "It's sloppy. It draws attention." "He's using unclaimed containers to move his product," another man complained, his jowls shaking. "It's bringing UFI heat on all of us." "Then we changed the toll," Enzo said. He finally looked up, his gray eyes sweeping the table. "Effective immediately. The pure Aurora processing fee doubles for any non-vetted manifests. We choke him out." My fingers flew across the keys. Green lane slot, unclaimed container, toll. I typed automatically, but my mind was racing. I wasn't just a stenographer. I was good at this. I wasn't just hearing words. I was seeing the system they were describing. A green lane wasn't a fast pass for customs. It was a blind spot. Unclaimed containers weren't lost cargo, and tolls weren't bridge fees. My gaze drifted to a man sitting at Enzo's side. He was younger than the others, in his late 20s, with restless, hungry eyes and a suit that was expensive but didn't fit him right. His name, I'd heard Enzo say, was Ridge. He wasn't watching the shipping men. He was watching me. His stare was cold, assessing. He wasn't looking at me like I was a person. He was looking at me like I was a loose end, a variable, a weakness. The men argued about percentages and routes. As they droned on, I found my right hand straying to the legal pad Moira had given me for overflow. I started to doodle. Except it wasn't a doodle. I was mapping their conversation. I drew the port. I drew Pure Aurora. I drew the customs checkpoint, the toll, and the green lane they were all obsessed with. They were complaining about a bottleneck, how Cade was moving product faster than they were, even with the chaos. And then I saw it. A simple, stupid flaw in their logic. They were all fighting over the same 2-hour window for the green lane between 3 and 5 a.m., when the shifts changed. But they were ignoring the other routes. I drew a second line, a yellow lane, the refrigerated container inspection bay. I just saw the pattern. The system was flawed. 10 minutes, Enzo said suddenly, standing up. The consortium men looked relieved, pushing back their chairs and heading for the bar. Ridge stalked off toward the hallway, already on his phone. Enzo stood, stretched, and walked over to my desk. I immediately slammed my hand over the legal pad. He stopped, looking at my hand, then at my face. "May I?" he asked. His voice was quiet. I hesitated. My heart was a bird in a cage. Slowly, I slid my hand away. He picked up the pad. He didn't speak for a full minute. His eyes traced the lines I had drawn. He tapped his finger on the circle I'd drawn around the yellow lane. "The refrigerated inspection bay," he said, almost to himself. "The thermal scanners are offline for maintenance. Every Tuesday, from 2 to 4 a.m. He looked up, and his gray eyes were sharp, not with anger, but with that same analytical shock I'd seen in the diner. "That's not a bottleneck. It's a wide-open door. Where did you learn to see systems like this?" I was in a logistics management program," I stammered, my face burning hot. "I had to drop out. I couldn't afford the tuition." He stared at the diagram, then back at me. "A waste," he said. He set the pad down. "Get some air. We resume in 5 minutes." I didn't need to be told twice. I pushed back my chair and practically ran to the glass doors leading to the balcony. I shoved one open and stepped out. The air was a shock cold, damp, and smelling of the port miles below. That familiar scent of salt, diesel fuel, and the metallic tang of rain. The city was a carpet of glittering lights, beautiful and indifferent. I gripped the railing, my knuckles white. The glass door slid open behind me. I tensed, my whole body going rigid. It was him. I knew it without turning. This was it, the price. He stepped out onto the balcony, but he didn't crowd me. He didn't touch me. He stopped, precisely one step behind me and slightly to my left. He was honoring the distance I had demanded. He was close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from him in the cold air, but far enough that I wasn't trapped. "You're shivering," he said. "I'm fine," I lied, my teeth chattering. "No, you're not." He slipped off his suit jacket. It was heavy, dark wool. Before I could protest, he draped it over my shoulders. It was impossibly warm, and it smelled like him, not cologne, but something clean, like expensive cotton and the ozone from the storm. We stood there for a long moment, just two shadows looking down at the city. It was the most respectful, terrifying, and confusing moment of my life. "Lena," he started, his voice quiet, "about that diagram." "Boss," Elias's deep voice cut in from the open doorway. "We have a visitor. Downstairs." Enzo's shoulders stiffened. "Who?" "UFI, Agent Holder. He's not coming up. He's waiting in the parking garage. By your car." My stomach dropped to my feet. "He's here." He followed me. Enzo turned, his face unreadable in the dark. He looked at me, and I knew that he knew. He put it all together. "Go," he said, his voice flat. "The meeting is over." "But I thought it was 2 nights." "You've already earned your pay," he said. He nodded toward the elevator. "Go hear what the clean future has to offer." I clutched his jacket tighter around my shoulders, and walked past Elias, my legs feeling like wood. The parking garage was a different world, cold, damp, and smelling of concrete and exhaust. Agent Kane Holder was leaning against a concrete pillar, just as Elias had said, right next to Enzo's empty, waiting SUV. He looked even more tired than he had last night. "Miss Ortega," he said. His voice was flat, echoing in the huge, empty space. "You didn't call." "I've been busy," I said, my voice sounding small. "I can see that." He gestured up, toward the penthouse, toward the club. "He's got you running his books now, recording his deals. Do you have any idea what you just implicated yourself in? Kid, you're an accessory." "He saved my mother's life," I repeated, but the words sounded weak, like a broken record. "And he's using it." Holder pushed off the pillar, his frustration clear. "We know Kate is moving product through that port. We think Bella Rosa is, too. But he's smarter. He's using Cade's chaos as cover to move his own. We want them both. Lena, we want to cut the head off Cade, and we want to stop Bella Rosa before he owns the whole city. You're on the inside now. You're seeing things we can't. Help us." My head was spinning. The man who paid my mom's bills. The man who promised a clean future. "What do you want from me?" I whispered. "A copy of those notes you just took. The laptop, anything." A sound, the ding of the private elevator. I looked over, Holder tensed. The doors slid open. Enzo Bellarosa stepped out, flanked by Elias. He wasn't armed, and he didn't look angry. He just stood there, 20 yards away, a shadow among shadows. Holder didn't back down. He and Enzo locked eyes across the concrete divide. The air crackled with a voltage I couldn't understand. The law and the order. Enzo didn't move. He didn't speak. He just gave the slightest, almost imperceptible tilt of his head. It was a look of pure, cold understanding. He had known Holder was here. He'd let me come down. This was a test. Moira Dace appeared at my elbow, silent as a ghost. I jumped. "Miss Ortega," she said crisply, "your payment." She pressed a thick, business-sized envelope into my hand. Holder looked at the envelope, then at me. His face crumpled in disappointment. "Don't take it, kid. Don't take his money. Once you do, you're his. You're gone." I looked at Holder, pleading with me. I looked at Enzo, who was just watching, waiting. And I thought of my mom, sleeping safely in a hospital bed that cost more than I'd made in 3 years. My fingers closed around the envelope. Holder let out a long, weary sigh. "You disappear. Lena, I warned you." He shook his head and walked away, his footsteps echoing until he was gone. I was alone with them. I opened the envelope under the dim, buzzing fluorescent light. It wasn't full of cash. It was a payroll check. Pay to the order of Lena Ortega. Amount $5, 400.00 from Glendale Key Public Relations, LLC, a shell company. Beneath the check was another document, a receipt from St. Lucie Hospital. It was marked, in big red letters, paid in full. He hadn't just paid the debt. He had laundered the payment. He'd made it legal. He'd made me an employee. I looked across the garage. Enzo hadn't moved. He was still watching me, his face a mask. I was still wearing his jacket. He met my gaze. He didn't smile. He just gave a single, short nod. "Welcome to the company." I stood there in the cold, damp air of the parking garage, the check from Glendale Key Public Relations in one hand, the paid-in-full hospital receipt in the other. My world had just been bought and paid for with a lie. Agent Holder was gone, his disappointed footsteps a fading echo across the concrete expanse. Enzo Bellarosa, flanked by his 2 silent guardians, just watched. He was waiting. My first impulse was to throw the envelope at him. My second was to cry with relief. I did neither. I was still wearing his suit jacket. It was heavy, ridiculously warm, and smelled like him. I slowly shrugged it off my shoulders, the cold of the garage hitting me instantly. I folded it carefully, as if it were a flag. I walked across the divide, my cheap, worn-out sneakers squeaking on the oil-stained floor. I stopped 5 feet in front of him. Elias tensed, a shadow shifting. Enzo didn't move. "Your jacket, Mr. Bellarosa," I said, my voice flat. I held it out. He didn't take it. He just looked at my face. "Enzo." He said, "It wasn't a request. It was a correction." A beat of silence. "Enzo," I repeated. The name felt heavy on my tongue. He took the jacket from my hands, his fingers brushing mine. It was a simple, accidental touch, but it sent a jolt straight up my arm. He tossed the jacket to Elias without looking. "You haven't eaten dinner," he said. I stiffened. "I'm not hungry." That wasn't a question. He looked at me, really looked at me, and the hard edges of the Halcyon Club boss seemed to soften. "You can't fight a war, Lena, not even a cold one on an empty stomach." He nodded to Elias, who understood the silent command, and went to the SUV. Enzo turned and started walking toward the garage exit, not the elevator. Where are we going?" I asked, scrambling after him. "I am going to get something to eat," he said, pushing the metal door open into the misty night air. "You are coming with me." This wasn't an invitation to the penthouse. There was no gleaming SUV when he just started walking. I followed, half running to keep up, my mind reeling. We walked 3 blocks away from the glass towers, turning into a neighborhood where the buildings were older, made of brick and history. We stopped at a window. It wasn't a restaurant, it was a stand, a brightly painted hole in the wall called El Arroyo Tacos. Yellow bug lights cast a warm, greasy glow onto a few plastic tables bolted to the sidewalk, right next to the churning, concrete-lined Arroyo Canal. The air smelled divine of grilled onions, cilantro, and roasting pork. 2 carnitas, 1 lengua, Enzo said to the woman in the window. He spoke in perfect, fluid Spanish, his voice holding a warmth and respect I'd never heard before, and 2 horchatas. He paid with a crumpled $20 bill from his pocket. Not a black card, not a corporate account, just cash. We sat at one of the plastic tables. The chair was cold and hard against my legs. This was the most surreal moment yet. The man who had faced down UFI agents and dropped $10,000 on a whim was now sitting across from me, waiting for tacos. "Why are we here?" I whispered, hugging my arms. "Because," he said, gesturing to the window, "Rosalita's carnitas are the best in Glendale Key. And because no one in this neighborhood has ever heard of Bella Rosa Logistics." He rolled up the sleeves of his expensive white shirt, revealing strong forearms. He seemed to shed his armor with the jacket. He was right. People walked by, huddled in their coats, and paid him no attention. He was just another guy grabbing a late-night bite. The food came on paper plates. It was messy and hot and incredible. I hadn't realized I was starving until the first bite. We ate in silence for a minute. The only sounds, the canal, the distant traffic, and the sizzle from the kitchen. "I used to work those," he said, his voice quiet. He nodded his head toward the horizon, where the massive, skeletal arms of the port cranes were barely visible against the night sky. "My first job, I was 16. I wasn't running them. I was a swamper, guiding the containers." I stopped eating, my taco halfway to my mouth. "You worked the docks." "Everyone in my family worked the docks. My father, his father." He took a drink of his horchata, his eyes distant. "You learn things down there. You learn to listen. You can tell the wind's mind just by the sound the cable makes when it sings against the boom. A high, thin whine," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "Means a crosswind. It'll push the container. A low groan means the air is heavy and straight. You can trust it." He looked at me. "You learn to see the system, just like your diagrams." My face warmed. That was just doodling. "I told you. I dropped out." "Why?" he asked. It was a simple question. "My mom," I said, looking down at my plate, "she got sick. The first time. The real first time, before this. I had a partial scholarship for the systems design program, but tuition money became prescription money, rent money. It was just the way it was." "A waste," he said again, just as he had at the club. But this time, it was soft. It was an observation, not a judgment. I shrugged, trying to make light of the cinder block on my chest. Well, all that time at the Vesper taught me something. How to manage a high-stress, low-margin inventory system. You ever try to calculate the avocado to brunch rush ratio? It's brutal. I looked up, and he was smiling. It wasn't the ghost of a smile from the diner. It wasn't the cold, calculating curve from the halcyon. This was a real, actual smile. It started in his eyes, a genuine warmth that lit them from gray to a soft silver, and it crinkled the skin at their corners. It transformed his whole face, erasing the hard lines, making him look younger, almost boyish. It was the most dangerous thing I had seen him do yet. "I can see that," he said, the smile lingering in his voice. "Your management of that spilled coffee pot, it was a model of crisis efficiency." I laughed. I actually, truly laughed, a surprised, rusty sound. "Oh, no, that was just pure, uncut panic." "Then you panic well, Lena." The moment hung in the air, warm and fragile. It was shattered by the roar of an engine. A car, a flashy, obnoxious muscle car with an illegally loud exhaust, screamed to a stop in the street right next to us. The passenger window slid down. It was Ridge, the restless, hungry-eyed man from the meeting. He stared at us, his eyes zeroing in on me, then shifting to Enzo. His face was a mask of pure, sneering contempt. He didn't say a word. He just gunned the engine, filling the air with a choking cloud of exhaust, and peeled out, his tires smoking. I jumped, spilling my drink. The fragile peace was gone. I was shaking again, the anger and the noise vibrating through me. Enzo didn't even flinch. He hadn't so much as glanced at the car. His gaze was locked on me. "He's a child," Enzo said, his voice calm, the smile gone, replaced by a cold annoyance. "He mistakes noise for power." My hands were trembling so badly I couldn't pick up my napkin. He reached across the small plastic table, his hand covering mine. He didn't grab or squeeze. He just laid his hand over my knuckles. It was heavy and steady and impossibly warm. "He's just a dog, Lena, barking at a car he can't catch." His thumb brushed the back of my hand. Just once, a slow, deliberate movement. It was like a live wire. I snatched my hand back as if I'd been burned, my breath catching in my throat. The spell was broken. "We should go," I whispered. The walk back to my building was silent, but it was a different silence now. It was charged, electric. The black SUV was waiting, Elias at the wheel, as if he'd never left. He pulled into my building's underground garage. It was cold, cavernous, and smelled of damp concrete and oil. Elias put the car in park. "I'll see her up," Enzo said, his voice low. "Boss," Elias rumbled, his eyes checking the mirrors. "Cade's man was here this morning. It's not secure." "Which is precisely why I will see her up," Enzo replied. He got out. I fumbled, getting out my side. We walked to the bank of elevators. The air was frigid, the buzzing of the fluorescent lights loud in the emptiness. He pressed the up button. The old, rattling metal box arrived with a heavy clang. The doors slid open. We stepped inside. The space was tiny, barely big enough for two people who weren't touching. The doors slid shut, sealing us in. I was suddenly aware of everything. The scratchy wool of his suit, just an inch from my shoulder, the way the cheap light cast shadows under his cheekbones, the slow, steady rise and fall of his chest. The air was thick, heavy, and I couldn't seem to draw a full breath. I was standing there, staring at the number 3 on the panel, when he turned his head. He didn't move closer. He didn't reach for me. He just looked at me. His gaze was heavy, analytic. It traveled from my eyes, Sakita, which were wide and probably terrified, down to my mouth, and held there for a single, agonizing second. Then it moved back to my eyes. It wasn't a leer. It wasn't predatory. It was a question. Clear, direct, and unmistakable. "May I—" My heart was trying to hammer its way out of my ribs. I thought of Agent Holder, cornering me, demanding. I thought of Ridge, trying to intimidate me. And I thought of Enzo, giving my mother back to me and giving me a choice. I gave the smallest, most infinitesimal nod. He moved slowly, so slowly, giving me every possible second to turn away, to say no, to push him back. He lifted one hand and cupped my jaw, his thumb brushing over the frantic pulse just below my ear. His other hand came to rest on my back, high up, spread wide across my shoulder blade, a safe, steady, respectful touch. And then he leaned in. It wasn't the consuming, bruising kiss I read about in books. It was warm. It was tentative. It was a question being answered. It was slow and deep, a discovery. It tasted of the cinnamon from the horchata and the cool night air and something that was just him. My hands, of their own accord, came up and gripped the lapels of his suit. I wasn't pushing him away. I was holding on. My knees felt weak. The little glass window in the elevator door, slick with condensation from the rainy night, began to fog from our breath. My heart, which had been hammering, seemed to slow down, to beat in time with his ding. The elevator jolted to a stop at my floor. He pulled back, but not far. His forehead rested against mine. His eyes closed. His breathing was as shaky as mine. He whispered it, his lips brushing mine as he spoke. "When you are ready, when you say yes, then I will move forward, not before." The door slid open. I stood there, stunned into silence. I was breathless. Agent Holder, the good guy, had tried to back me into a corner. Enzo Bellarosa, the bad guy, had just handed me all the power in the world, in his world of absolutes and commands. He had given me the one thing I'd never had. A choice. Thrum, thrum. The sound was violent in the small, silent space. It wasn't my phone. It was the black, encrypted phone he'd given me, buried in my coat pocket. I fumbled for it, my hands shaking. The screen was lit. Moira Dace. Enzo was watching me, his expression sharpening, the softness from the kiss vanishing, replaced by the boss. I answered, "Hello? Lena." Moira's voice was crisp. "All business. Apologies for the late hour. There is a development. Your mother is stable, so do not panic." "Well, what is it?" "Her county health insurance policy, it was just canceled, effective immediately." My blood ran cold. "What? That's impossible. She's been on it for 5 years. Why?" "They're citing suspicion of fraudulent claims. It seems an anonymous tip was called in, suggesting she had undeclared assets." A pause. "Someone has been digging into her past. Lena, into your past." I hung up, my hand dropping to my side. I looked at Enzo. I was shaking, but not from the cold, not from the kiss. This was rage. "They canceled her insurance," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "Someone told them she had assets. They're trying to destroy her." Enzo's face was carved from granite. "Cade." He said the name like a curse. "He couldn't get to me at the diner. He can't get to me at the Halcyon, so he's hitting your foundation. He's trying to break you to get to me." "What am I going to do?" My voice cracked. "She can't be discharged, but she can't stay there without insurance. They'll kick her out." Enzo's hand was already on his own phone. He wasn't calling Moira. He was calling someone else. "Elias, Starflare. I want the penthouse suite prepared for a new patient. Full respiratory setup. Authorize the transfer from St. Lucent tonight." He hung up and looked at me, his eyes dark. "There's a place. Starflare Wellness Center. It's a private, long-term care facility. It's secure." "What do you mean, secure?" "My family's foundation is its primary benefactor," he said, his voice flat. "She will be safe there. Cade and his rats can't touch her. The insurance problem is irrelevant." I stared at him. Another rescue, another debt, another set of golden chains. "Another one of your gifts, Enzo." The words were sharper than I intended. "Another gilded cage I'll have to pay for." "It is a sanctuary," he said, his voice hard, cutting. "It is not a gift. It is a necessity. He will not stop. Lena, he has targeted your family. This is the only way." He was right. I was trapped. Cade, a man I'd never met, was holding a gun to my mother's head, and Enzo was the only one offering a shield. "All right," I said, the word bitter. I accept for my mom. She'll go to Starflare." I looked him dead in the eye, the fear finally burning away, leaving something cold and hard in its place. "But on my condition, my other condition." "Name it." "No more games, no more legal as necessity allows. You said I had a job. I'm good at this. I saw the flaw in your system in 10 minutes, but I won't be your secretary in the shadows. If I'm in this, I'm in. I want the truth. I want to know what Bellarosa Logistics really is. Everything." He studied my face for a long time. There in the hallway, I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. "You're asking to see the engine room," he said softly. "It's not clean. Lena, it's loud and it's hot and it's dangerous." "I'm tired of being scared," I said. "Show me." He nodded, a slow, final gesture of acceptance. "I will show you the density of the shadow," he promised, "and I will show you the way out." He didn't take me into my apartment. He turned back to the elevator. "Elias," he spoke into his phone. "Change of plan. The Vesper Overlook. Now." The ride up the hills of Glendale Key was silent. The SUV was warm, but the tension was back. Different now. It wasn't romantic. It was professional. We got out on a high bridge, a pedestrian walkway that shuddered when trucks passed below. The wind up here was fierce, whipping my hair across my face, below us. The port was spread out like a glittering, futuristic city. A circuit board of lights, green, red, and yellow, with the giant cranes moving in the dark like sleeping dinosaurs. Enzo stood beside me at the railing, not touching but close. The kiss in the elevator felt like a dream from another life. "This," he said. His voice carried on the wind, gesturing to the massive, brightly lit expanse of Pier Aurora. "This is Bella Rosa Logistics. This is the legal part. We move 90% of the city's produce." He then pointed to the dark, unlit channels between the main piers, the places the big ships couldn't go, the places I'd identified on my diagram. "And this," he said, his voice dropping, "is the necessity. The shadow, Cade lives there. He moves his product, and he's sloppy, and he's violent. I manage it. I keep it contained. I set the tolls. I keep him out of the main lanes." I stared down at the darkness, at the green lanes and yellow lanes that were invisible from here. "You're not a port boss," I whispered. "You're a gatekeeper." "I am what I have to be," he said, turning to look at me, his face a mask in the dim light. "And now, so are you." We stood there for a long time, shoulders almost touching, the wind howling around us, the silent, glittering port laid out at our feet. He had shown me the board. Now I had to learn the game. The promise of seeing the engine room wasn't metaphorical. The Vesper overlook was for show, for the grand philosophical view of his territory. The reality was a concrete bunker hidden beneath a nondescript cargo forwarding office 2 blocks from the pier. It was called the Argonaut Station. It wasn't a room full of thugs. It was a server farm. It was cold, the air humming with the sound of high-capacity fans. A single wall was a mosaic of monitors, displaying what looked like 1,000 different security feeds, shipping manifests, and lines of scrolling code. This was the brain. "You wanted to see the truth," Enzo said, his voice low in the humming room. "This is it. This is where the game is actually played." Moira was here. Elias was here, standing by the only door, a mountain in a suit. They were the only other occupants. "That's our main customs API." Enzo pointed to a screen of rapidly scrolling data. "It's the digital handshake between our system and the UFIs. It's supposed to be secure." "Supposed to be," I murmured, stepping closer. The code, it felt familiar, like the systems I had studied. "Can I?" Enzo nodded to Moira. She wordlessly handed me a keyboard and a login. "You are now Contractor 7, she said, her voice dry. I sat down, and for the first time in my life, my brain felt like it was firing on all cylinders. I wasn't just a waitress. I wasn't just a victim. I was me. It took me 20 minutes. "It's not a glitch," I said, my voice shaky with adrenaline. "It's a module. Someone inserted a fake API gateway." I pointed to a string of code. "Right here. It's a ghost. Cade isn't just avoiding your green lane system. He's using it. He's creating phantom manifests. His containers pass through. The system checks them, finds a valid manifest, and waves them on. Then, 2 seconds later, this module erases the record. The container never existed." Enzo's face was stone. "He's not going around me. He's walking right through my front door." "It's worse," I said, my fingers flying. "He can't just do it any time. He needs a physical window, a moment when the digital entry and the physical passage line up, but no human is watching." Elias stepped forward, unfurling a large, blueprint-style map of Pier Aurora onto a central table. It was a schematic of guard patrols, camera sight lines, and shift changes. "He's right, he needs a blind spot." My eyes scanned the patrol routes. "There." I jabbed my finger at a single intersection. Checkpoint 7B. "Right here. The night shift guard for Section 7 clocks out at 3:57 a.m. The day shift guard for Section 8 clocks in at 4 a.m. But his first pass of 7B isn't until 4:03. The camera on that corner is on a 3-minute automated reboot cycle that starts at exactly 4 a.m. I looked up at Enzo. He has a 3-minute window. Every single night, that's his golden window. That's when his phantom trucks roll through. Enzo stared at the map, then at me. A slow, cold anger was building in his eyes. He didn't yell. He didn't punch a wall. He just went still. "We shut it down," he said, his voice a flat, deadly monotone. Moira's head snapped up. "Enzo, you can't be serious. Shut what down?" "All of it, Ma," he said. "The entire pier. We declare a 24-hour emergency systems audit. We stop every ship, every truck, every crane. We strand $1 billion of cargo in the water." "You'll lose millions," Moira argued, her voice rising. "The Port Authority will fine us into the ground. Our clients, the legitimate ones, they will sue. They will leave us. Cade will win without firing another shot." "No," Enzo said. "Cade is comfortable. He's gotten sloppy. He thinks his system is perfect. We shut it all down. And his phantom containers, they get stuck. They'll be sitting on our pier, in our warehouses, like rats in a trap when the lights come on. He'll be exposed." Moira shook her head. "It's too much risk. The blowback will be catastrophic." "It is better," Enzo said, his voice dropping to that icy register I'd heard in the diner, "than letting Ronan Cade push his poisons into my city. It's better than letting him use my lanes to do it." Before Moira could argue again, the news feed on one of the monitors lit up. It was a local news flash, the face of Agent Kane Holder, looking grim and official at a press podium. "Following last night's violent incident at the Vesper Diner," Holder was saying, "and in light of new intelligence, the UFI will be conducting a full-scale, unannounced integrity inspection of operations at Pier Aurora, effective immediately." Moira swore, her professional mask cracking. "He leaked. Cade's crew or someone leaked the diner shooting to Holder, and now Holder is using it as a pretext to come after you." Enzo just smiled, that cold, calculating smile. "No," he said. "This is perfect. We wanted an excuse for an audit. Agent Holder just gave us one. We're not shutting down because I say so. We're shutting down because the UFI is forcing us to—" He looked at Elias. "Lock it down. Cooperate fully." As Elias and Moira jumped to their phones, activating the shutdown protocols, I saw him, Ridge, the man from the muscle car. He'd been standing in the shadows of the server room, watching. He pulled out his own phone and slipped into the stairwell. I crept closer, just enough to hear. His voice was a low murmur. "Yeah, it's me, no. The whole thing is going dark. Belarus's orders, but UFI is the cover. I don't know. Man, he's got the waitress with him. Yeah, her, I'll handle it." He clicked off and stepped back into the room, his eyes meeting mine. He knew I'd been listening. A slow, poisonous smirk spread across his face. He was the leak. He was Cade's mole. My blood ran cold. I turned back to Enzo, who was now deep in logistics with Moira. "They'll just move the containers," I said, my voice cutting through their argument. Enzo turned to me. "What?" "Ridge, he's the leak. He's working for Cade. He just warned him. By the time Holder's team gets here, the phantom containers will be gone. They'll just put them on different trucks and move them to a new warehouse." Enzo's jaw tightened. He knew I was right. "Then we find them faster." "You can't," I said, my brain racing, connecting the dots from my old systems design classes. "You're looking for the containers, but they're ghosts. You need to look for their fingerprints." He stared at me, waiting. "You have weight sensors and thermal scanners at every checkpoint, right for the manifests." "Yes," Moira said. "It's automated." "Cade's module creates a fake manifest, but he can't fake physics," I said, turning back to the keyboard. "His product, it has a weight, it has a temperature. It's not going to be a perfect match for a container of textiles or bananas. I can write a filter. We scan the entire pier's active data, every container logged in the last 48 hours. We don't look for Cade's phantom ID. We look for the discrepancy. We flag every single container whose actual weight is off by more than, say, 5% from its manifested weight, or any dry goods container that's reading 10 degrees colder than the ambient temperature." A slow look of profound understanding dawned on Enzo's face. "You'll find them," he whispered. "You'll find every single one." The audit was a quiet apocalypse. The giant cranes stood still against the sky. The pier was silent. save for the hum of Holder's UFI vans and the click of my keyboard. Enzo, Moira, and Elias stood behind me in the Argonaut station, watching the program run. It took an hour. Then ping. Got one, I said. Warehouse 4C, refrigerated unit. Manifest says pharmaceuticals. Weight is correct, but the internal temperature is off. It's reading too warm. Way too warm for meds. Ping, ping, ping. 3 more. Same warehouse. Different manifests. Same thermal anomaly. Ping, ping. 2 more. Total of 6 containers. I looked at Enzo. They all smell like ammonia, according to the chemical sniffer logs. Ammonia, Enzo said, his voice flat. It's a precursor. It's a key ingredient. Elias, Enzo commanded. Lock down warehouse 4C. Nobody in. Nobody out. He then looked at Moira. Get me the UMA. The UMA, Moira looked shocked. The Urban Materials Assessment Authority, Enzo. That's a civilian agency. They're clean. They'll seize it. It's out of your hands. That's the point, Enzo said, his eyes on the screen. Holder's UFI is compromised. Cade has moles in there, just like he has Ridge. The UMA, they're just scientists. They report to the city, not the feds. He looked at me. You call them Lena. Use your name. Report a hazardous materials leak. It was a brilliant move. He was using a neutral third party to expose Cade, keeping his own hands clean. The UMAA team arrived within 30 minutes. We watched on the security feeds as men in full-body white hazmat suits swarmed Warehouse 4C. They cut the seals on the 6 containers. They took samples. We waited, the silence in the Argonaut station so thick I could barely breathe. Enzo's private line buzzed. He put it on speaker. It was the UMA team leader. Mr. Bellarosa, this is Director Singh. We've completed our assessment of the 6 containers you flagged. And Enzo's voice was tight. And it's nothing. What do you mean, nothing? Enzo snapped. I mean, it's industrial cleaning solvent, Singh said, his voice full of bureaucratic annoyance. High ammonia content, sure, but it's just high-strength floor-washing liquid. The manifests are a little sloppy, but there's nothing hazardous or illegal here. You just shut down the entire city port for soap. Sir, the mayor is not happy. The line clicked dead. My blood turned to ice. It was a trap. Ridge. He must have known. He didn't just warn Cade to move the containers. He'd warned him to swap them. He'd left 6 containers of literal soap that perfectly matched my filter's anomaly high ammonia. Thermal signature off knowing I would find them. He'd used my own intelligence against me. Against us. The feeds on the other monitors lit up. News. Bellarosa's phony audit port boss cries wolf. City loses millions. Cade Industries welcomes new clients fleeing Bellarosa's chaos. I had failed. I had personally handed Ronan Cade his biggest victory. Enzo didn't speak. He just stood there, staring at the screen, at the images of UMA crews packing up their gear. He looked defeated. Then my black phone vibrated, the one he'd given me. It was a text from an unknown, blocked number. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely read it. Ridge is on his way to Starflare, taking your mom for a drive. The floor dropped out from under me. I didn't scream. I didn't say a word. I just turned, my legs numb, and held the phone out to Enzo. He was in the middle of a frantic, whispered argument with Moira, the full weight of the financial disaster crashing down on them. He stopped. He read the screen. The air in the room didn't just get cold. It became a vacuum. Enzo Bellarosa looked up from the phone, and the man who'd smiled over tacos, the man who'd kissed me in the elevator, was gone. In his place was something I hadn't seen before, something truly terrifying. He didn't speak. He didn't yell. He simply put his fist on the central console table and pushed. The entire setup monitors, keyboards, maps went crashing to the floor in a shower of sparks and broken glass. He grabbed my arm. Elias now! He didn't wait for the elevator. We took the stairs, 2 at a time. He drove, not the smooth, flowing grace of his driver, but with a brutal, controlled violence. The SUV screamed out of the garage, mounting the curb, forcing its way into traffic. We got to the Starflare Wellness Center in 6 minutes. It should have taken 20. We burst into the lobby. It was quiet, serene, smelling of lavender. And there he was, Ridge. He wasn't dragging my mom. He was standing at the reception desk, a bouquet of flowers in his hand, laughing with the nurse. He was charming her. Ridge, Enzo's voice was a roar. It was the first time I'd ever heard him shout. Ridge turned. The smile on his face didn't falter. It just changed. It went from charming to venomous. Boss and the little systems analyst. Come to visit. Enzo crossed the lobby in 3 strides. He didn't touch him. He just got in his face. A wall of pure, vibrating menace. You will not come here. You will not speak her name. You will not come within 500 yards of this building or anyone in it. Ever. Again. Ridge just smirked, unfazed. He looked past Enzo, his eyes finding me. He was enjoying this. He was enjoying my terror. Relax, boss, Ridge sneered, dropping the flowers on the floor. Kay just wanted to unplug your new favorite toy. He jerked his chin at me. He wanted to see what happens when you cut the power to your heart. He held Enzo's stare for one more long, insolent second, and then he laughed. A short, ugly sound. He turned, sauntered leisurely out the automatic glass doors, and disappeared. Enzo stood there, his back to me, his shoulders rigid, his hands clenched into white-knuckled fists. He was breathing hard, fighting for control. He knew, we both knew, the pier was a game of money and power. This was different. Kate had found the real target. The next move wouldn't be against Bella Rosa Logistics. It would be against me. I didn't realize I was on the ground until I felt the cold, damp concrete of the Starflare veranda through the thin material of my jeans. My legs had just unlocked. I was sitting on a low brick planter, my head in my hands, trying to breathe, the sound of Ridge's laughter, the casual, brutal way he'd threatened my mother. It was playing on a loop in my head. The lobby doors slid open. I flinched, expecting Ridge to be back. It was Enzo. He had stayed inside for a few minutes, probably to calm the terrified nurse, to reestablish the fortress. His face was a pale, rigid mask of fury. He walked over, not to me, but to the bench a few feet away, and just stood there, his back to me, staring out into the manicured, rain-soaked garden. He was vibrating. His hands clenched so tightly at his sides that I could see the tendons standing out on his wrists. He was fighting it, the raw, violent impulse to send a reply, as Elias would say. After a long minute, his shoulders slowly unknotted. He let out a breath, a long, ragged sigh that turned white in the cold air. He shrugged off his heavy, wool topcoat. He turned and walked to me, but he didn't crowd me. He sat on the bench, a good 3 feet away, leaving a space of cold, empty air between us. He didn't touch me. He just held out the coat. I stared at it. I'm not cold. I whispered. It was a lie. I was shaking so hard my teeth were chattering. Take it, Lena, he said, his voice quiet, but with an edge of command I couldn't fight. I let him drape the impossibly heavy, warm coat over my shoulders. It was the 3rd time he'd done it, the 3rd time he'd shielded me. I've never, I started, my voice cracking. I had to force the words out. I've never been important. Not like this. I've always just been invisible. The waitress, the daughter, the broke student. Nobody ever looked at me twice. I pulled the coat tighter, burying my face in the collar that smelled like him. Now I'm a target. I'm leverage, and he's enjoying it. He's enjoying that. I'm that. I'm my heart. He finished for me, his voice a low growl. Cade unplugging the power to my heart. He turned his head, his gray eyes catching the dim garden light. That's what he called you. I'm scared, I whispered, the admission tearing out of me. I'm so scared, Enzo. Not just of him, I'm scared that because of me you'll... Escalate, he said. He knew. You're afraid I'll start a war, and that your mother will be the first casualty. He leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. staring at the wet brick. "When I was 22, he said. His voice so low I had to lean in to hear it. I was different. I was more like Ridge, all noise and anger. I was trying to prove myself. I had a kid working for me on the docks, Marco. He was 18. Just a kid, smart, fast, reminded me of me." His voice went flat, dead. "A rival crew, not Cade. Someone worse, they grabbed him. They wanted me to give up a route. I told them no. I thought him back and keep the route. I could have both." He paused. "They sent him back, in pieces. I learned that day you can't have both. You can't protect the business and the people. You have to choose." He turned his head, and his gaze was raw. "I chose wrong. I've spent the last 12 years trying to build a fortress so high. No one could ever touch the people inside. I never put people on the line. I use money. I use systems. I never use people. Until you, Cade, sees you. And he sees Marco. He sees my one, single, unprotected person." The silence that followed was heavy, filled with the ghosts of his past and the fears for our future. "Then you have to make a different choice this time," I said, my voice finding a strength I didn't know I possessed. I stood up and faced him. "I meant what I said on the bridge. I'm in this, but this changes the terms." "Lena?" "No, this is the boundary. Enzo, the real one. Not the one in the elevator, not the one on the bridge. This is it. You have to protect her. You have to protect me, and you have to do it clean. From now on, no gray zones, no necessity. If I so much as smell a Marco situation, if you choose the route over her, I'm gone. I will take her, and I will disappear. I don't care about the debt. I don't care about Cade. I will run, and you will never find me." He stood up, his face unreadable. He was being challenged, perhaps for the first time in a decade. "A clean war," he said, testing the words. "That's what you're asking for." "I'm telling you," I countered, "or I'm out. Your choice." He held my gaze for a long, agonizing moment. I didn't blink. I wouldn't. "All right," he said, "clean. But clean doesn't mean safe. It means smarter. It means we use the law. It means we use everything." He took a step closer. "And if I'm going to be clean, then you're going to see it all. Not just the port, not just the shadows, all of it." He took me to an office I'd never seen before. It wasn't the Argonaut station. It wasn't the Halcyon Club. It was a bright, airy loft in a renovated brick building downtown. The sign on the door just said the Aurora Foundation. Inside, there were no bodyguards, just people. Young people on laptops, walls covered in blueprints for parks, charts detailing after-school program enrollments. "This," he said, "is the light gray book. This is the other half of the toll I collect." He led me into a back office and unlocked a file cabinet. He pulled out a thick, heavy ledger, not a digital file, a book. "My grandfather started this," he said. "He believed the port didn't just use the city, it owed the city. Every toll I collect, 30% goes here, untouched, unreported, laundered through a dozen different charities. Yes, but it's clean on this end." He opened the book. My eyes widened. It wasn't just Starflare. It was the Glendale Key Scholarship Fund. It was the St. Lucent Pediatric Wing. It was 3 different homeless shelters, a legal aid clinic, and the community center in my old neighborhood. "This," I whispered, "what's tracing a line item. This is you're paying it back. You're trying to balance the scales." "The scales never balance. Lena," he said, his voice rough, "they just get heavier. This is how I live with it." He was showing me his confession, his penance. He was showing me the why. The threat from Ridge was too immediate. My apartment was compromised. He took me to a place he simply called the Flat. It was a penthouse, but not like the Halcyon. This was personal. It was all glass and warm woods, a minimalist, beautiful space high above the city with a staggering 180-degree view of the bay. The city lights glittered below us like a carpet of fallen stars. It was silent. It was safe. Elias had stocked the fridge. Moira had sent up a secure laptop. They left. locking the heavy steel door behind them. We were alone, 20 floors above the world. I stood by the window, his coat still draped over my shoulders, watching the tiny pinpricks of light from the ships in the harbor. He had just shown me his deepest secret, not the crime, the atonement. He came to stand beside me, not touching, just sharing the view. "You're safe here," he said softly. "For how long?" I whispered. "For as long as it takes." I turned to look at him. The hard lines of the boss, the cold fury from star flare, it was all gone. In the soft, dim light of the apartment, he was just Enzo, the man who had listened to the wind in the cranes, the man who had shown me his grandfather's ledger. "Thank you," I said, "for showing me. The foundation. You didn't have to." "You did," he replied. "You said no more shadows. This was the last one." The air between us was electric, but it wasn't the fear from the garage or the tentative questions from the elevator. This was different. This was the stillness after the storm. This was two people who had seen the worst in each other's worlds and hadn't run. He lifted his hand slowly, just as he had in the elevator. He didn't touch my face. He just brushed a stray strand of hair back from my cheek, his fingers barely grazing my skin. His eyes held mine. That same question. "May I?" But this time, I wasn't just nodding, I was answering. I leaned forward just that single inch and closed the distance. The kiss it wasn't a kiss. It was a sigh. It was every bit of fear and gratitude and tension from the last 48 hours melting away. It was slow and deep and sure. His hands came up to frame my face, his thumbs stroking my cheekbones, and I sank into his touch. My hands, which had been clutching his coat, slid inside, gripping his shirt. He pulled back, just enough to look at me, his breathing unsteady. "Lena," he whispered, his voice thick. "Are you sure?" "I'm here," I whispered back. It was all I needed to say. He kissed me again, and this time there was a fire beneath the tenderness. It was a kiss of promises, of choices made. He led me away from the window, toward the simple, clean lines of the bedroom. The city lights outside blurred into a soft, glittering backdrop. His touch was impossibly gentle. His hands, which I'd seen clenched in rage, were now slow and deliberate. He unbuttoned my thin, cheap blouse, his eyes asking permission at every single button. I gave it with a nod, my heart hammering. He kissed my jaw, my throat, his lips warm against my skin. He traced a line down my collarbone, and I shivered, but not from cold. "You're safe," he murmured against my shoulder, his arms circling my waist, pulling me close. "I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere." And as his shirt fell to the floor and his hands, warm and sure, guided me back, the world of concrete bunkers and UFI agents and gunfire dissolved. There was only the smell of clean cotton and pine, the warmth of his skin, the steady beat of his heart against mine, and the feeling, the overwhelming, impossible feeling of being completely and totally safe. The city lights watched over us as the night finally, mercifully went dark. I woke to the smell of coffee and the soft, pale gray of dawn. I was in a massive, comfortable bed, tangled in sheets that felt like clouds. For a disorienting second, I didn't know where I was. Then it all came rushing back. I sat up. I was wearing one of his t-shirts. My clothes were gone. They're in the dryer. I jumped. Enzo was sitting in an armchair by the window, already dressed in dark slacks and a fresh, button-down shirt. He wasn't looking at the view. He was reading a stack of reports, a cup of coffee steaming on the table beside him. He looked domestic. It was jarring. He saw me clutching the sheet to my chest, and his expression softened. "There's a robe in the closet. Elias dropped off some necessities. For both of us." He stood up, walked over to the bed, and picked up a thick cashmere blanket from the foot. He draped it over my shoulders, his hands warm. "You slept," he said, a small, genuine smile touching his lips. "It's almost 7 a.m. I haven't slept like that I couldn't even remember. The trust from the night before was still there, a warm, steady glow in the morning light. He wasn't a monster. He was just a man, a complicated, dangerous, and impossibly gentle man. The black encrypted phone on the nightstand, my phone, the one he'd given me, vibrated. Enzo's good mood evaporated. He was instantly the boss again. "Who is it?" "Moira," I said, my blood running cold as I answered. "Moira, what's wrong?" "Bad news." Her voice was clipped. "All business. I just got a tip from my contact inside the UFI. Holder is on the warpath. He's preparing a warrant." "A warrant for what?" Enzo said, his voice hard. "Not for what, for who," Moira said. "They're sealing the Argonaut station. They're claiming they found the source of the Cade data leak, the internal leak." A sick, horrifying premonition crawled up my spine. What did they find? They found the admin credentials that were used to install Cade's Phantom API module. Moira said. There was a pause. "Lena, the credentials they found, they're yours. The login was L. Ortega." I stopped breathing. My eyes snapped to Enzo. This was it. The test. The moment he would realize I was the poison, the weakness. The moment he'd turn on me. He was staring at me. His face was granite. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just watched me, his gray eyes searching mine. "Enzo," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I swear I didn't—" "They planted it," he said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. He'd looked at me, and he'd weighed the evidence of the last 2 days against the digital frame-up, and he'd made his choice. He believed me. "We'll prove it," he said, his voice a low, lethal promise. He was already on his own phone. "Elias, we have a new problem." We didn't panic. We went to work. We were back in the engine room, but this time the engine room was his living room. He had a full, mirrored setup of the Argonaut systems right here in the flat. "They're sloppy," I said, my fingers flying across the secure keyboard Moira had brought. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp rage. They had put my name on it. They planted my login, but they didn't cover their tracks. "Find it," Enzo said, pacing behind me, a mug of coffee in his hand. "Cade's module wasn't installed from inside Argonaut," I said, my eyes scanning the code. It was routed through an external proxy, a leased server. They just faked the login credentials to make it look like an inside job." "Where?" It took me another 10 minutes. "There, a co-op data farm in the Atlas Yard." I pulled up the billing info. It's leased to a shell company, Neon Rill. Elias, who had arrived and was standing by the door, spoke. "Atlas Yard, that's Cade's territory, but it's neutral ground, messy." He looked at Enzo. "I'll take a team. We'll grab the server." "No," I said, standing up. "You can't. You'll go in, you'll grab it, and Ridge will claim you stole it to destroy evidence. They need me. It's my name on the warrant. I'm the only one who can unlock the server's root directory on site and prove the data was planted before Holder's team seizes it as evidence." Enzo turned on me, his eyes blazing. "Absolutely not. You are the one person who cannot go." "I am the only person who can," I shot back, meeting his fire. "This is what you promised. Clean. Smarter. This is smart. Using their own frame job against them. I go. I find the file. I prove the timestamp. We give it to Moira, and she hands it to a judge. Clean." He stared at me. A war raging behind his eyes, the protector versus the strategist. The strategist won. Barely. "Fine," he bit out. "But you are not going alone, and you are wearing this." He went to his safe. He didn't pull out a weapon. He pulled out a small velvet box. Inside, on a simple silver chain, was a small, flat, platinum pendant. It was modern. Simple. "This isn't jewelry," he said, his voice grim. He fastened it around my neck, his fingers warm against my skin. "It's a distress beacon, military grade. It's tied to my phone and to Elias. It has a 20-mile range." He cupped my face, his gaze intense, desperate. "If anything feels wrong, if a car backfires, if you see Ridge, if you get a bad feeling, you press this button." He tapped the center of the pendant. "Do you understand me, Lena? The second you press that, all other priorities cease to exist. The plan is over. I will come. I don't care if the entire UFI is there. I will come for you. I tucked the pendant under my shirt, the metal cold against my skin, right above my heart. I'll press it when I need to, I said, my voice steady. Not a second sooner. The Atlas Yard was an industrial graveyard. It was a city of forgotten steel, populated by mountains of rusting, multicolored shipping containers. And the rain, of course. The rain was torrential, horizontal, turning the puddles of oily water into percussion instruments. It was just after 2 a.m. The pendant Enzo had given me was a cold, heavy weight under my shirt, a constant reminder of the stakes. I wasn't a waitress. I wasn't a secretary. I was the key to proving my own innocence, and I was walking straight into the heart of Cade's territory. Elias, you take the east perimeter. Enzo's voice crackled, low and urgent, in the tiny earpiece he'd given me. Javier, south, Moira and Lena. You're with me. We go in quiet. We are ghosts. We moved through the maze of containers, the sound of the wind screaming through the metal canyons. The data farm wasn't a building. It was a reinforced, climate-controlled container, a co-op cage tucked between 2 stacks of rust. Elias, who had materialized from the shadows, checked the lock. He didn't pick it. He used a high-torque electronic key. The heavy steel door hissed open. Moira and I slipped in first. The room was hot, suffocating, and loud with the whine of servers, racks of blinking green lights. Moira, the door, Enzo murmured, staying in the threshold, a shadow watching the yard. I went straight to the central rack, the one labeled Neon Rill, and I saw it. Enzo, I whispered. On the metal floor grating, right below the main router, was a small, perfect crescent of wet mud, fresh. Someone was here. Tonight. Moira, cool as ice, was already patching her secure laptop into the cage's internal security feed. Camera's on a loop, she said, her voice tight. But the cache got it, 3 hours ago. The grainy, black and white footage flickered to life. My stomach clenched. It was Ridge. He wasn't alone, and he was with a smaller figure, someone wearing a heavy rain poncho, the hood pulled so low their face was just a smear of shadow. Ridge was talking, angry, while the hooded figure worked. They weren't planting code. They were physically swapping a network switch, pulling one box out, plugging a new, identical one in. They planted the hardware, I whispered, horrified. They put the El Ortega exploit physically into the system. Ridge just swapped the evidence. Which means, Moira said, her eyes narrowing, the original switch, the one with the real evidence, is gone. No, I said, my mind racing. He's sloppy. He's always sloppy. He's noise. He swapped the switch. But he wouldn't know how to wipe the mainframe router log. He just cut the connection. I plugged my own laptop into the main rack. I wasn't just Contractor 7 anymore. I was the ghost in their machine. I'm in. My fingers flew. I was tracing the route path, looking for the origin of the El Ortega credentials, the mud, the hardware swap. It was all a distraction. Got it. I breathed. The original credentials, they weren't planted here. This isn't possible. What? Enzo's voice was sharp. The login, the original hack that put Cade's Phantom API in the Argonaut, it was routed. It was proxied through an IP address inside the Urban Financial Investigations mainframe. Moira looked sick. A UFI proxy. That's not just a mole. That's a state-sponsored attack. They're using government servers to frame you. A boot, Enzo said, his voice flat. Outside. We all froze. Moira killed the monitor. Enzo stepped back from the door, melting into the shadow of the server rack. A heavy, wet footstep on the gravel, then another. A bright, blinding flashlight beam cut through the dark, sweeping across the cage. Lena Ortega, I know you're in there. UFI. My heart stopped. It was Kane Holder. I'm not here for you, he called out, his voice weary, echoing in the yard. My weapon is down. I'm alone. I need to talk to you. I looked at Enzo. His face was granite. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. I stepped out of the cage, My hands raised. Moira was right behind me. Holder looked terrible. He was soaked to the bone, his trench coat dripping, dark circles under his eyes. His weapon was, as he'd said, holstered. "You're a hard woman to find, Miss Ortega," he sighed. "You're the one framing me," I shot back, my voice shaking with a cold fury. "What?" He looked genuinely shocked. "Frame you, kid. I'm the one who's been trying to warn you. I've been tracking Ridge since the diner. I followed him here tonight." "He was meeting someone," I said, testing him. "Someone from UFI. Holder's face went grim. "Yeah, I saw Agent Marla Vane. She's Cade's. She's been feeding him internal data for 6 months. She's building a case against me while she works for him. She's the one who created the L. Ortega login. She was trying to frame you to invalidate my entire investigation. I came here to grab the server to prove it." "She was here," Moira cut in, stepping forward. "She was here with Ridge. They swapped the hardware. The evidence is gone." "No," Holder said, running a hand through his wet hair. Ridge is still here. Vane left in a hurry, but he went up. To the gantry. Crane 7. "He's cleaning up," a new voice said. Enzo stepped out of the darkness, Elias appearing at his side like he'd been teleported there. Holder didn't even flinch. He just looked at Enzo, a deep, profound exhaustion on his face. "Bella Rosa, this is the part where you tell me to get lost, and I tell you, you're under arrest." "No," Enzo said, walking forward until he was standing between us, a shadow king in his court of rain. "This is the part where we agree. Ridge is the witness. He's the only one who can tie Vane directly to Cade. We need him. Alive." Holder stared at Enzo for a long, hard second, the cop and the kingpin, trapped in the same storm. "We take him together," Holder said, pulling his weapon from its holster but keeping it pointed at the ground. "My testimony. Your witness. It's the only way to nail Vane and Cade at the same time." Enzo nodded. "Elias, you take the high ground." Elias just vanished. He didn't run. He just melted back into the stack of containers. "Lena," Enzo said, turning to me, "stay here, with Moira. Lock that door." "No," I said, pushing past him. "Ridge is my problem. He came from my mother. Vane put my name on that server. I'm not hiding in a box while you fix it. I'm going." Enzo's jaw tightened. He looked like he was going to argue. But I think he saw something in my eyes that he hadn't seen before. The fear was gone. "Stay behind me," he growled. We ran, up the slick metal stairs of Crane 7, the wind trying to peel us from the railing. The gantry was a narrow catwalk, 100 feet above the concrete, a river of rusting steel. The rain was a solid wall of water. "UFI Ridge, show yourself," Holder yelled into the wind. We saw them, at the far end of the platform, Ridge and the hooded, poncho-wearing figure. They were cornered. "It's over," Ridge, Holder shouted. "Vane's gone. She left you." Ridge laughed, a wild, high-pitched sound that was snatched by the wind. "She didn't leave. She just promoted me." He shoved the hooded figure forward. "You first. Clean up the mess." Then he pulled it. A gun. Black and ugly in the flashing emergency light of the crane. He wasn't aiming at Holder. He wasn't aiming at me. He was aiming right at Enzo. Time stopped. It was just the rain, the muzzle of the gun, and Enzo, who was 10 feet away, too far to reach, his eyes wide. I didn't think. I didn't scream. My hand, which had been clutching the front of my jacket, found the pendant underneath. I slammed my thumb into the center of the cold platinum. Click. It wasn't Enzo who moved. It was a shadow. A black shape detached itself from the crane housing above Ridge. It was Elias. He dropped 20 feet, a 250-pound man, and hit Ridge like a speeding car. The sound was a sickening thud of body on metal. The gun went off, a bright, harmless flash aimed at the sky. It skittered across the wet metal and disappeared over the edge. "The other one," Holder yelled. The hooded figure. In the chaos, they were scrambling, climbing down the side, using a service ladder like an animal. Stop UFI Holder scrambled after them. The figure was fast. They fumbled at their belt, and something small and black fell from their hand, clattering onto the catwalk. Then they were gone, swallowed by the darkness of the yard below. Elias had Ridge pinned, his knee on his back, cranking his arm. Ridge was screaming, half in pain, half in rage. Holder was at the edge, peering into the dark, cursing. Enzo wasn't looking at any of them. He was staring at me. His face was pale. He'd seen me press the button. He was breathing hard, his hand half raised, as if to reach for me. I am here. You called. I am here. I broke the stare and ran forward, my eyes fixed on the thing the hooded figure had dropped. A portable hard drive, black, armored, and waterproof. I scooped it up. The high-security flat was a war room. It was 3:30 a.m. Ridge was in the custody of Elias and two of his men in a secure room somewhere else. Kane Holder was pacing Enzo's living room, dripping water all over the expensive rug, his face grim. I plugged the hard drive into my secure laptop. It's not code, I whispered, my eyes scanning the files. Oh my God. It was a map, a new one, a different ghost stream. Enzo, I said, my voice shaking. Ridge Vane, they weren't just covering their tracks. They were setting up the real operation. I pointed to the screen. Look, it's a new route. It's not the green lane. It's not the yellow lane. It's a single, dedicated manifest tied to one charter vessel. The Mariner's Trace, Enzo read over my shoulder, his voice dangerously quiet. It docks at dawn, I said, in 2.5 hours. What's it carrying? Holder demanded. A single container. Manifest says agricultural precursors, I said, my blood running cold as I recognized the term from my research. This isn't just product. This is Cade making his move. This is the big one. He's bringing in enough to bypass his suppliers and take over. Enzo turned, his face a mask of cold fury. Elias, get the team. We're moving. We stop that ship. We take that container. No, Moira, who had been silent this whole time, finally spoke. Enzo, you can't. It's a legal trap. It's the real trap. We all turned to her. Don't you see, she said, her voice frantic. Vane let you catch Ridge. She dropped that hard drive for you to find. She wants you to go to that pier. She'll have a different UFI team, a clean team. Holder's rivals waiting for you. The second you and your men step onto that ship, she'll spring the trap. Not Cade, you. Armed hijacking of an international vessel. Interfering with a federal investigation, Holder won't be able to protect you. She'll have you. She'll have Cade's shipment and you'll be gone for 30 years. The room went silent. She was right. He was completely, utterly trapped. He couldn't let the shipment in. He couldn't stop it without destroying himself. Holder let out a long, ragged breath. She's right. Vane has a federal task force on standby. I'm getting alerts right now. They're mobilizing. He looked at his watch. It's almost 4 a.m. I'm still the ranking agent on this case for now. I can delay her warrant. I can tie it up. Claim the evidence from the yard is compromised, but not for long. I can give you maybe 6 hours until 6 a.m. After that, my authority is gone. The task force goes live, and I can't save any of us. 6 hours, we were staring at an unwinnable ticking clock. And then I saw it. The system, the flaw. We don't stop it, I said. Everyone turned to me. We don't stop the ship, I said again, my voice stronger. We don't hijack anything. We reroute it. I looked at Enzo. You were right about the UMAA, the Urban Materials Assessment Authority. They're neutral. They're clean. They report to the city, not the feds. What's your point? Lena Holder asked, impatient. The plan is simple, I said, turning to the keyboard. Cade and Vane are expecting a gunfight. They're expecting a raid. They're not expecting paperwork. We let the container off the ship, but we control the crane. It doesn't go onto Cade's Phantom truck. It goes on to one of our trucks, a Bellarosa logistics truck, with a legitimate, pre-filed manifest for the Maya seizure depot. We can't fake a manifest that fast, Moira said. We don't have to, I said, holding up the hard drive. Vane gave us everything. I can clone the electronic seals, the weight data, the manifest ID. We create a perfect legal diversion. We send Cade's container, his entire nest egg, straight to the UMAA's hazardous materials lockup. We file it as an anonymous tip. My eyes met Enzo's. Cade has two choices. He can go to the UMAA and publicly claim his illegal shipment, or he can let it go. And Vane, her task force, will be sitting at the pier, waiting for a gunfight that never happens. The room was silent. Enzo stared at me, and that look of analytical shock from the Halcyon Club was back. He let out a slow breath. "Lena," he whispered, you just wrote the perfect port plan." He turned, the boss in full command. "Moira, make the call. File the UMA transfer. Elias, get the truck. Holder, give us our 6 hours." He turned back to me, the adrenaline of the coming dawn bright in his eyes. He gently touched his forehead to mine, a brief, desperate, grounding touch. "Stay close to me," he whispered, his voice rough, "right by my side." I looked at the map on the screen. The maze. Cade's maze. Vane's maze. "I'm not just staying by your side," I said, pulling back, my voice as steady as steel. "They built this maze. I'm going to lead you through it." The sun hadn't yet cleared the horizon, but it had begun to bleed, staining the underside of the clouds a bruised, watery pink. The air was cold, biting, and heavy with the smell of salt and diesel. The Mariner's Trace was a mountain of dark steel, gliding into the berth with a low, groaning rumble that vibrated in my teeth. This was it. Hour 0. "Lena, now!" Enzo's voice was a low command in my earpiece. We weren't on the ground. We were 50 feet up, climbing the narrow, slick rungs of the crane gantry. The wind up here wasn't a breeze. It was a physical opponent, trying to peel my numb fingers from the metal. We moved into the crane's control cabin, a glass box suspended over the void. The operator, a man loyal to Enzo, gave a curt nod and slid out, disappearing down the ladder. "Moira, Elias, are you visual?" Enzo asked, his voice calm. He wasn't looking at the ship. He was watching the yard, the access road, the door to the cabin. He was my living wall. "Visual, boss." Elias's voice crackled back. "Sanitation crew is in position. We look very official." "Shipping coordination is live," Moira added. "The UMAA transfer is filed and timestamped. The window is open." I took my place at the operator's terminal. This was the real Argonaut station. I plugged my secure laptop into the crane's main interface. "I'm in," I whispered, my fingers flying. "I have the E-seal codes. I'm accessing the manifest." Below us, Cade's phantom container, the real one, was the first one off. The massive crane hook descended, the magnets locking on with a deafening clang. "Elias, on the move," Enzo said. The crane whirred to life. I wasn't just watching, I was doing it, using the terminal to guide the container, swinging it in a slow, massive arc not toward the waiting, anonymous truck Cade had arranged, but toward Elias's bright yellow port sanitation flatbed, parked near the UMAA runoff channel. "Cade is watching," Enzo said, his voice quiet. He hadn't moved from the door. "He's in a town car, half a mile out, near the access road. He just lit a cigarette." "Let him watch," I murmured, my eyes locked on the code. Cloning the manifest, diverting the tracking ID done. The UMIA container is now officially hazardous waste pending analysis. "Now the dummy," Enzo said. "On it," picking up the empty from Pier 4. I had to switch crane feeds, which meant logging out of the primary system. It required a physical reboot of the console, a manual switch. "I have to go outside," I said. "The hard reset is on the gantry." Enzo's head snapped around. "No." "It's the only way. It takes 2 seconds." Before he could argue, I was out the door. The wind hit me like a fist. I grabbed the railing, the metal so cold it burned my skin. The reset panel was 6 feet away, on the main arm of the crane. I sidled along the narrow catwalk. I reached the panel, flipped the cover, and hit the reset. The crane lights flickered. A sudden, violent gust of wind slammed the entire structure. The gantry shuddered. My foot, slick with rain and oil, slipped. I didn't fall. I just dropped. My hands scraped against the metal. my body lurching into the void. A steel band clamped around my waist. Enzo. He'd moved like a panther. He hadn't just grabbed me. He'd hooked his arm around my entire body, yanking me back against his chest, shielding me from the wind with his own. My back was flush against him, his heart hammering against my shoulder blade. I was breathing his air, the smell of clean cotton and cold rain. "I've got you," he growled in my ear, his voice rough with adrenaline. We stood there for a second, pinned against the railing, 50 feet above a fatal drop. Whoomp! The Mariner's Trace blasted its horn, a sound so loud it shook my bones, breaking the spell. I'm okay," I stammered, my knees weak. He didn't let go. Not yet. He just held me there. Secure. "Go," he said, his voice tight. "Finish it." He didn't release me until I was safely back inside the cabin. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clear. The kiss in the elevator was a question. This was an answer. I got back on the terminal. The system was rebooted. "Uploading the cloned e-seal to the dummy container," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Moving it into Cade's target slot, slot 12A. I guided the empty container now marked with the exact digital signature of Cade's real shipment and placed it perfectly where Vane's UFI team would expect to find it. "It's done," I breathed, sinking back. "The bait is set. The real container is on Elias's truck, heading for the UMA depot." "Good," Enzo said. "Moira, pull the—" "Enzo, problem." Moira's voice was sharp in my ear. A big one. "Talk to me," Enzo said, his gaze fixed on the yard. Elias got Ridge to talk. He sang, "The pickup at the pier, it was a fake, a distraction. The real pickup, the place where Cade's buyers are meeting, is at the old depot blacktop. That's the real trap." "Then we moved the team to blacktop," Enzo said. "We can't." Moira's voice was frantic. "That's not the problem, Marla Vane. She's not waiting for the 6-hour window. She's not waiting for Holder. She's moving now. I'm seeing UFI tactical vans, 6 of them, they're staging at the main gate. She's pushing the rate up by 90 minutes. My blood ran cold. "She's not waiting for the bust," I whispered, realizing the new trap. "She's trying to catch us right now in the act of swapping the containers." As if on cue, the gate at the far end of the pier burst open, not with sirens, but with silent, flashing blue lights. A convoy of black UFI vans swarmed the tarmac. But they weren't alone. From the other side, from the unsecured cargo entrance, 2 heavy-duty pickup trucks, the kind Cade's crew used, rumbled onto the pier. They were blocking our exit. We were caught, trapped between Marla Vane's corrupt UFI team and Cade's armed thugs. She wasn't just framing Enzo, she was planning to have him caught in a pincer. "Elias," Enzo's voice was ice. "You are clear with the primary package. Do not engage. Get that container to Yume. That is the only priority. Split your team. Create a diversion at the south gate." "Copy, boss," Elias crackled back. "Lena, with me." Enzo grabbed my hand. He didn't wait. He kicked the cabin door open and pulled me onto the gantry. Down go. We weren't climbing. We were sliding, half falling down the emergency rungs, hitting the tarmac just as the first shouts echoed across the yard. "There by the crane, UFI, don't move." "Enzo," I grabbed his suit jacket. "Not the open yard, the maze. This way." I pulled him into the nearest canyon of shipping containers. It was a different world, dark, narrow, and echoing. The sound of the wind was replaced by the booming foghorns of the ships in the bay and the sound of running boots on pavement. "Vane's team is blocking the west," Enzo murmured, his phone lighting up with a tactical map from Elias. "Cade's men are on the east." "They're hurting us," I whispered, my heart hammering. "They're pushing us toward the central yard." We ran. We ducked behind a stack of blue Hanjin containers, the foghorns so loud they masked our footsteps. We were 2 rats in a steel labyrinth, and the walls were closing in. "This way," I said, pointing to a narrow gap between 2 stacks. "It leads to the old customs bay. It should be clear." We burst through the gap and into a nightmare. It was the central clearing, and it wasn't empty. A single set of headlights illuminated the space, cutting through the pre-dawn gloom. Cade was standing in the beams, a long overcoat on, a smug, vicious smile on his face. "Well, well, well," Cade's voice boomed, amplified by a small speaker. "Enzo Bellarosa, caught red-handed, playing in the containers, I believe. Agent Vane, this is what you were looking for." On cue, the UFI van screamed into the clearing, surrounding us. Doors flew open. Agents in tactical gear, Vane's team poured out, their weapons all pointed directly at Enzo. Marla Vane herself stepped out, her face a mask of triumph. "Enzo Bellarosa, you are under arrest for—" "Hold your fire." A new set of sirens, a different set. Kane Holder, in his rumpled sedan, skidded into the yard, blocking Vane's van. He burst out, his own UFI team smaller, but looking just as surprised fanning out. "Vane, stand down," Holder yelled, holding up a file. "This is my operation, and my primary witness," he pointed at Cade, "is right there. This entire pier is being sealed under Section 44B of the Federal Port Authority Act." A legal standoff. My heart was pounding. Vane looked furious. Cade looked confused. Enzo hadn't moved. He hadn't raised his hands. He just stood there, his gaze fixed. Not on Vane, not on Cade, but on Kane Holder. "Agent Holder," Enzo said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "You're looking for the real shipment." "You're damn right I am," Holder spat. Enzo just smiled, that cold, brilliant smile. "Then you're in the wrong place. Try the Yuma Hazardous Seizure Depot, Warehouse D, authorization code 818. Holder froze. Vane's face went white. Cade's smug smile didn't just fade. It shattered. He knew. He knew instantly. The Yuma, the civilian agency, the one place he couldn't use his moles or his money to get his property back. His shipment was gone. He took a step back, melting toward the shadow of his town car. "This isn't over, Bellarosa." "Let him go," Enzo murmured to Holder. Holder looked at Enzo, then at the retreating Cade, and made a choice. He let the big fish go to secure the pier. Marla Vane, however, was not done. She was shaking with rage. She'd been outmaneuvered, her entire operation ruined. She pointed her weapon directly at Enzo. "He's the one he was interfering with the manifest. He hijacked that crane. I'm arresting him." "No, you're not." I didn't realize I was moving until I was standing in front of Enzo, my body shielding his. "Agent Holder," I said, my voice high but clear. "My name is Lena Ortega. Agent Vane used her UFI credentials to plant a false data module framing me for Cade's operation. The real evidence of that hack is on a server in the Atlas Yard, which Agent Vane and Ridge tampered with." I pointed at the UFI vans. "Check her team's entry logs. Check the server. I'm a systems analyst. Agent, the data doesn't lie." Holder looked from me to the terrified, furious look on Marla Vane's face, and then to the cool, calm certainty in Enzo's. He knew. "Agent Vane," Holder said, his voice deadly, "lower your weapon. You are now relieved of duty, pending an internal investigation." Vane's face crumpled. It was over. Enzo's hand found the small of my back, a silent, steady pressure. "I'm here. You did it." We were safe. The pier was secure. Elias had the container. My personal phone, the one with the cracked screen, buzzed in my pocket. Not the black phone, my real one. I pulled it out, my hands shaking from the adrenaline. A text message from a blocked number. My blood turned to ice. "You're clever, but you just gave away the package. You cost me my entire operation. Don't think it's finished. I want my money back. Bellarosa. And you? Little girl, you're going to pay for it. Depot Blacktop. Tonight, or I start with your mother." It was from Cade. He wasn't running, and he was doubling down. He was calling for the final move. The pier was a victory, but it felt hollow. Kane Holder was left to clean up the legal mess, his team processing a furious, sputtering Marla Vane. We were in the safe flat, the sun now high and bright, but the text from Cade burned a hole in my pocket. "He's desperate," Enzo said, pacing the living room, the adrenaline from the pier raid fading, replaced by a cold, coiled tension. He's lost his shipment, he's lost his mole in the UFI. A desperate man is a predictable man. He'll throw everything he has at this. He's not just trying to win, he's trying to burn the board. Depot Blacktop, I said, my voice quiet. He said, tonight. He thinks I'm predictable, too, Enzo murmured. He stopped pacing and looked at Moira. It's a trap, obviously. A triple-layered one at least, Moira said, typing rapidly. 1 Cade and his remaining crew, 2 UFI agents still loyal to Vane, acting off-book. 3, she paused. A Bellarosa traitor. He's counting on someone from our side to turn. Ridge was just the visible one. He wants me. I said, it wasn't a question. He said, Trao Okung plus Lena, the hard drive, and me. He thinks I'm your weakness, the one he can still use to get his money back. Enzo turned to me, his eyes dark. You are not going. Yes, I am, I said, standing up. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but the rage from Starflare was colder. He threatened my mother. Enzo. He used my name to frame you. He put my life on the table as a bargaining chip. I am not your weakness. I am not a piece to be protected. I am the bait he wants fine. He can have the bait, and we are going to set the hook. He stared at me. A silent, violent war happening behind his eyes, the protector versus the strategist. He had promised to keep me safe. I was asking him to do the opposite. Lena, he said, his voice a low, rough whisper. You don't know what you're asking. This isn't the pier. This isn't a game of paperwork. This is the end. This is where people like him. This is where Marco happens. No, I said, stepping closer. Marco happened because you chose the route, because you weren't there. I am going. With you. You promise clean. You promise smarter. This is the only smart play. We end this. We end him. Or I'll live the rest of my life looking over my shoulder. My mother will live the rest of her life in a fortress. I won't live like that. I put my hand on his arm. His muscles were rigid like steel. You said it yourself. Stay close to me. I'm staying so close you can't lose me. He looked down at my hand, then back to my face. He finally let out a long, ragged breath. He was terrified. Not for himself, for me. And in that moment, I knew I had made the right choice. Moira, he said, his voice flat, all business. Prep her. Moira nodded, her face grim. She pulled me into the bedroom and handed me a light, Kevlar vest. It goes under your shirt. It's thin, but it will stop a small caliber round, not a rifle. She then clipped a tiny, button-sized camera lens to my jacket. This is a live feed. I'll be in the van, a block away, recording everything. Elias has an armored truck, a literal armored truck as an escape route on the north perimeter. But Lena, she gripped my arms. Once you're in, you're in. It's on you and him. Night fell like a shroud. Depot Blacktop wasn't just a yard, it was a graveyard of old, defunct city buses. Rusted and piled high, it was a maze of dead metal. We walked in alone, just me and Enzo, side by side. The only sound was the crunch of gravel under our boots and the howl of the wind through the empty bus windows. Showtime, Bellarosa! Cade's voice boomed from a loudspeaker, echoing off the metal. You came, and you brought the little analyst. Smart, stupid, but smart. A single, harsh spotlight snapped on, pinning us in its beam. Cade was standing on top of a bus, maybe 50 yards away. The terms are simple, he yelled. The hard drive from the Atlas Yard, and her. You slide them both over, and I'll forget this morning ever happened. I'll even let you keep your precious port. We can renegotiate the tolls. Enzo stood impassive, a shadow in the glare. You don't want the hard drive. Cade, there's nothing on it. Liar. I'm not. Vane and Ridge were sloppy. The real data, the data that matters, I already have. Enzo reached into his coat. My heart stopped. Cade's men. Shadows on the roofs, raised their weapons. Enzo pulled out a small, flat device. He clicked it. A shimmering, pale blue light projected into the air between us. It wasn't a movie. It was simple. stark data, a 3D rendering of a fingerprint. "What is this?" Cade spat. "That," Enzo said, his voice calm, "is the digital signature of your subordinate, a man named Leo Vance. That is him signing for the container at the UMAA depot this morning. You didn't just lose the shipment. Cade, you were tricked into accepting its seizure. You personally confirmed the chain of custody. You played yourself. It was a bluff, a brilliant, beautiful, and complete bluff. I had no idea if he had that data, but Cade didn't know." Cade was silent. Then he started to laugh, a slow, ugly, cracking sound. "You think that matters," he roared. "You think a judge is ever going to see that? Who's going to bring that evidence to court? You, Agent Holder. Oh, wait, Marla." On cue, a second spotlight hit a different bus. Marla Vane was standing there, in her UFI tactical vest, a service weapon in her hand. She wasn't in cuffs. She was free. "He's right, Enzo," she sneered. "My career might be over, but I'm making sure yours is too." She raised her gun and fired. Crack! The shot wasn't at us. It was a warning shot, straight into the air. "This is an unsanctioned operation. Bella Rosa, you're all going down." And then, from the shadows behind us, from the direction we had come, a third voice. "I don't think so." My blood ran to ice. It was Ridge. He stepped out, his gun held steady, but he wasn't pointing it at us. He was pointing it at Cade. "I'm tired of you both," Ridge snarled. Cade, you're a dinosaur, and you..." "Enzo, you're just soft. The port belongs to me now. I'm taking both of you out." A three-way standoff, Cade's men, Marla, and Ridge, all guns pointed at each other. "Ridge, you idiot," Cade screamed. "Kill him, kill Bella Rosa." Ridge just laughed. "In a second, after I kill you." It was chaos, and then I saw it. On Enzo's chest, a tiny, dancing, brilliant red dot. A laser sight. It was coming from above, from the roof of the main depot warehouse, 300 yards away, a sniper. I didn't scream, I just reacted. "Enzo, down." I grabbed the front of his suit and threw all my weight backward, pulling him off his feet. Zizty. A sound like a giant, angry hornet tore through the air where his heart had been a millisecond before. The round impacted the bus behind us with a clang that vibrated in my teeth. We were on the gravel, me on top of him. He had his arms wrapped around me, his body instinctively shielding mine even as we fell. "Lena," he breathed, his voice rough, desperate, his eyes searching mine in the dim light. "Lena, it's time. Press the button." My hand, already under my shirt, found the pendant. It was warm against my skin. I pushed it. The world ended. The spotlights, the yard lights, every single source of illumination, poof. Total, absolute, impenetrable darkness. And then the sound, thwump, thwump, thwump. From the three different directions, smoke grenades, white, choking. Beautiful smoke flooded the yard, illuminated only by the frantic and panicked flashlights of Cade's men. Move, UFI Holder's team, hands in the air. Kane Holder's voice. He was here. He and his clean team, and I could see their shapes through the smoke men in Yuma vests, the scientists. They were the neutral observers. They were the witnesses. It was a perfectly executed, clean raid. In the chaos, a shape lunged out of the smoke, Marla Vane. Her face was a mask of sheer animal panic. She wasn't trying to shoot. She was trying to grab me, a shield. "Lena, move," Enzo yelled. He shoved me so hard I stumbled, and he took my place. He put himself between us. He didn't try to hit her, he just blocked. Marla screamed inarticulately, a sound of pure rage, and swung the butt of her rifle. It connected with the side of Enzo's head with a sickening, wet thud. He didn't make a sound. He just stumbled. His knees buckled. Blood, dark in the smoke, streamed from his temple. "No!" I screamed. "Route 14B is clear." I grabbed the small radio Moira had given me, my voice suddenly clear, cold and precise. "Sniper is on the depot roof. Northwest corner, I need a flank team west side. There's a stack of empty containers. You have cover, go. My system's logic brain had taken over, seeing the map, the routes, the flaw. Team 2, move, Holder's voice crackled back. Cade was running. He jumped off the bus, scrambling for his town car. Ridge was firing wildly in his direction, just spraying bullets into the smoke. Vroom! A new sound, an engine, the armored truck, Moira. She slammed the massive vehicle right into the side of Cade's car, pinning it against a chain-link fence with a shriek of tortured metal. Marla Vane was on her knees, dazed, Holder's team surrounding her. I saw Kane himself rip her weapon away and snap the cuffs on her wrists. Marla Vane, you are under arrest for evidence tampering, conspiracy, and attempted murder of a federal witness. The sirens were deafening. The yard was a whirl of red and blue lights, smoke, and shouting. I didn't see any of it. I was on my knees on the gravel. Enzo was slumped against the wheel of a bus, his eyes dazed, his hand pressed to the side of his head. There was so much blood. He looked at me, his gaze unfocused. He was trying to smile. Lena, he whispered, you're safe. He slumped, his eyes rolling back, his hand falling away from the wound. He went limp. I caught him before he hit the ground. I held his head in my lap, the sirens wailing around us, my hands covered in his blood. No, I whispered, my voice breaking. No, you stay with me. You hear me? Enzo, you don't get to do this. You don't get to save me and then leave. Don't leave me. Don't leave me. The world dissolved into a tunnel of screaming sirens and flashing red and blue lights. My hands were slick with Enzo's blood, my own voice hoarse from pleading with him to stay with me. Paramedics, part of Holder's clean raid, had swarmed us in seconds. They loaded him onto a stretcher, his face a ghostly pale under the harsh yard lights. I tried to ride in the ambulance, but they gently pushed me back. Family only, ma'am. I looked at my bloody hands. What am I? Moira appeared at my side, her face a mask of grim efficiency. You're with me, she said, pulling me toward her armored truck. Elias was already there, his face like thunder. The ride to Saint Lucent, my hospital. Our hospital was a silent, terrifying blur. I sat in the waiting room, the same waiting room where I'd once worried about a $10,000 deposit. Now I was worried about a man's life. I was still wearing my Kevlar vest under my blood-stained shirt. I felt numb. Hours passed. Kane Holder came in, his face gray with exhaustion. He's stable, he said, not unkindly. Concussion, a fractured temporal bone, but the scans are clear. He's lucky. That rifle butt could have... He didn't finish. What now? I whispered, my voice sounding like gravel. Now we clean up. He nodded to the TV in the corner, where the local Dawn News was already live from Pier Aurora. A woman from the UMA was at a podium. Can confirm the seized container, which was diverted to our facility thanks to an anonymous tip, contains a significant quantity of non-declared hazardous agricultural precursors, consistent with large-scale narcotics manufacturing. The chain of custody has been traced directly to a holding company owned by Mr. Ronan Cade. The feed cut to Holder from an hour ago. The UFI, he announced, is launching a full internal investigation into the actions of Agent Marla Vane, who has been arrested on charges of conspiracy and evidence tampering. We are forming a temporary integrity task force, and we'd like to thank the vital assistance of a civilian analyst, Miss Lena Ortega, whose systems logic work was instrumental in uncovering this plot. My face, my name, on the news, not as a victim, as an analyst. Moira handled the rest. Cade was arrested, his assets frozen, facing a string of federal charges under the RICO Act and something called Port Law 9F. Ridge, who had sung like a canary, was also charged, but was looking at a reduced sentence for turning state's evidence against both Cade and Vane. Enzo was questioned in his hospital room for 2 hours. I sat outside, Elias standing guard like a statue. When the agents left, Moira walked out, a small, tight smile on her face. He's not being charged, she said. We provided full cooperation, the hard drive, Ridge's testimony. Your analysis, we were given full transactional immunity for our role in dismantling Cade's organization. He's free. He's free. I walked in. He was sitting up in the bed, a stark white bandage wrapped around his head. He looked pale, tired, and more human than I'd ever seen him. He looked at me, and his eyes, all the shadows. The calculations, they were gone. He just looked at me. "You're okay," I whispered. The relief so profound it made my knees weak. "You," he said, his voice rough. "You're okay. You gave orders. In the field. I heard you on the radio." "I saw the roads," I stammered. "You saw the system," and he corrected, a small smile touching his lips. He held out his hand. I took it, my fingers lacing with his. He wanted out. The night at the depot, the moment he thought he'd lost me, it had been his Marco moment, all over again. He'd chosen me over the fight, and in doing so, had almost lost everything. He was done. A week later, he was in his flat, the bandage gone, replaced by a raw, healing scar at his temple. He called a meeting. Me, Moira, Elias. "I'm dissolving the management side," he announced, his voice flat. "The tolls, the green lanes, the necessity. It's over. Cade is gone, and I'm not waiting for the next one. I'm keeping Bellarosa Logistics the real one, the ships, the produce, the part my grandfather built." He turned to me. "But it needs to be run, clean, transparent. The Argonaut station needs to be rebuilt. This time as a legitimate global supply chain security firm. I want you to run it, Lena, not as Contractor 7. As the chief systems officer." I stared at him, the job of my dreams, the life I'd given up on. "I will," I said, my voice steady, "on one condition." He raised an eyebrow. "You're right, it's over. All of it, not just for you, for everyone. All those gray operators you managed, they don't just go wild, they sign on or they're cut off. All contracts become transparent, all tolls become legitimate service fees, and we agree to full, external oversight from a civilian board." Moira looked like she was going to faint. "Lena, that's giving up all control." "That's the point," I said, my eyes locked with Enzo's. "No more shadows for anyone." Enzo stared at me for a long time. Then he smiled. That real, genuine smile I'd seen over tacos. "The Aurora Compact," he said. "We'll draft it today. A new set of rules for the entire key. Full transparency. And 30% of all profits go into the foundation. Officially." My mother was discharged from Starflare the following week. She was healthy, her new medication working, her old spark back. She still thought Enzo was just that handsome, polite boy who helped us. I stood with him at the window of the flat, the one that overlooked the harbor. The lights on the pier were different. They were brighter. It was the bustle of a port that was finally, truly open. He came up behind me. He didn't touch me, not yet. "It's done," I whispered. "It's beginning," he replied. I turned to face him. The war was over. The adrenaline was gone. We were just us, two people, scarred and tired, who had walked through a maze and come out the other side. "Thank you, Enzo," I said, for listening, for choosing." "Thank you, Lena," he said, his voice rough. He cupped my face, his hands so warm. You showed me the way out." His kiss was soft. It held no desperation, no questions. It was a promise. It was the period at the end of a long, terrifying sentence. It was all the trust we'd built, all the fear we'd shared. It was slow and deep, and it was a vow. His suit jacket, the one I'd worn so many times, slid from his shoulders and fell to the floor, forgotten. The glass door to the balcony was open, and the cold, salt-scrubbed wind of the bay washed over us. A clean slate. He held me, and I held him, and as the lights of his new, clean city glittered below, we finally let the night and the past go. 1 year later, the Aurora Compact was the new standard for the entire West Coast. Kane Holder, after testifying against Vane, had helped restructure the UFI into the new Bureau of Economic Integrity, or BEI. He'd even consulted on our new Argonaut systems. The Vesper Diner reopened. I went in one afternoon, just for a coffee. Greg, the manager, almost cried when he saw me. He'd hung a framed, gold-plated plaque on the wall of booth 12. It was a picture of the simple vinyl seat. The plaque read, "Table 12, where one call changed 2 lives." I stood at the front of a lecture hall at Glendale Key Community College, in front of a packed room of students. The slide behind me read, "Supply Chain Security in the Modern Age," an introduction by Lena Ortega, CSO, Bella Rosa Logistics. I was teaching. I was living my dream. In the back row, in a simple, dark sweater, sat Enzo. Oh, he wasn't the boss. He wasn't the kingpin. He was just a man, watching me with a quiet, private smile, the same way he'd watch me in the rain. Moira had opened a community law firm, funded by the new Aurora Foundation. Elias, in a crisp new uniform, was the official, legitimate director of port security. I got home to the flat that night. An envelope was slipped under the door. No name, no return address. Inside was a single photograph. It was grainy, dark, but unmistakable. It was a picture of Crane 7, silhouetted against that bloody pink dawn. Taped to the bottom was a slip of paper with a single sentence in his familiar, sharp handwriting. "Every maze has an exit. When we walk it together." The final knot was untied last week. The courts, in light of his full cooperation and the success of the BEI partnership, had formally accepted the Bella Rosa conversion. He was, in the eyes of the law, 100% legitimate. The shadows were gone. Today, we're standing on the deck of a container ship, a real one, filled with bananas from Costa Rica. The wind is fierce, whipping my hair across my face, tasting of salt and freedom. He stands beside me, his arm wrapped firmly around my waist, his gaze on the open water. We're not running, we're not hiding, we're just sailing into a future that is finally, blessedly, our own. Thank you so much for listening to our story. I'm so curious. Where are you tuning in from? Let us know in the comments so we can all connect and share our thoughts. If you enjoyed this, please be sure to subscribe to our channel, Mafia Boss Stories, and give this video a like. And if you really want to support us, hit that hype button to help this story reach even more listeners.